this time, he tried to circulate his internal energy, but internal energy is not a miracle drug after all, and it cannot cure children's colds and fevers. Of course, it may also be related to the fact that he has only been practicing for a short time. The internal strength he has, like a firefly, is really not of much use. The trace of internal energy in Dantian dissipated. Yi Shua felt a little bit of heat at first, but in a moment, the internal energy was exhausted, and the heat that had risen with great difficulty went out with a puff like blowing out a lamp. Yi Shua couldn't help but sigh deeply. He didn't want to do this, but he felt really sorry for Wu Yi. It is better to ask others for help than to ask yourself. Seeing that things could not be done, Yi Shua did not hesitate. He opened his mouth and shouted with a hoarse voice, come here quickly." After all, he was a patient, so Yi Shua's voice was much quieter and more vague than usual. In addition, since he could speak, he hardly called anyone at night, so the sleeping in the outer room didn't hear it at all. However, outside the window, Wu Yi, who was lying on the tree branch, moved his ears. There seems to be some movement. Then he heard the little prince shout twice again. After confirming, Wu Yi jumped down without hesitation. He quietly pushed open the window and saw the little prince with a red face and coughing non-stop. Wu Yi was stunned for a moment. Then his expression changed slightly. The little prince is sick. After receiving the news, the whole Qiuwu palace was shaken, especially the young in the outer room, who woke up instantly and almost shouted for help. The candles in the main hall soon lit up. The sixth prince was half asleep in the side hall when he heard some noise. He also heard people outside saying that the youngest prince had a fever in the middle of the night. The sixth prince, who originally felt sleepy and weak, shuddered and sat up subconsciously. Concubine Rong had no time to wash and dress, or even change her clothes. She just casually put on shocks and rushed out in her slippers. The nanny behind her kept shouting, "My queen, be careful not to catch a cold." But how could Concubine Rong care about so many things? Her hair was disheveled, and the short distance of less than 20 meters had become a torture. Perhaps because she was too anxious, Concubine Rong soon broke out in a sweat. She pushed open the door of the room suddenly and looked at the little thing with red cheeks, closed eyes, and almost whole body sunk into the quilt. Concubine Rong's breathing stopped, her legs went weak, and she almost fell to the ground. Nanny Yu, who was standing by, was quick to reach out and support her. "Madam," Nanny Yu was anxious. No matter what, the queen must not fall down first. Definitely not. Concubine Rong clenched her teeth, dispelled the dark intent in front of her eyes, and staggered towards the wooden bed. After hearing the noise, Yi Shua, who was originally full of ashamed and trying to escape from reality, quickly opened his eyes. After seeing her mother's current state of embarrassment, Yi Shua was immediately shocked. "Mom, what's wrong with you?" Seeing his full-throated voice, Concubine Rong was startled, and then finally couldn't control herself and broke down crying. I thought you." God knows how terrified she was when she saw her son lying there with his chest motionless. She was afraid that her son would be gone. Now Yi Shua knew that she had misunderstood and immediately explained, "I'm fine." Apart from a little tonsillitis and fever, Yi Shua did not feel any other discomfort. If necessary, he could even lift the quilt, stand up, and run a few laps. In Yi Shua's opinion, children have poor resistance, so it is very common for them to catch colds and fevers. However, Concubine Rong did not think so. Hadn't she seen how many children in the palace died because of sudden fever in the middle of the night? Anyway, she wouldn't believe anything Yi Shua said now. Imperial Concubine Rong turned around, her expression uncontrollably fierce. "What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and call the Imperial Physician, and get the Imperial Physician on duty to come to me." The Chief Physician was the highest official position in the entire Imperial Medical Bureau, equivalent to the director of a modern hospital. Suyu did not dare to delay upon hearing this. She bent her knees slightly, not caring about anything else, and ran out quickly with her back to the Imperial concubine. There's no need to mobilize so many troops. Yi Shua hesitated and was about to say something, but when he saw his mother's eyes suddenly become murderous, he tactfully shut his mouth. Soon, the sixth prince followed closely behind. Looking at his brother's flushed face, the sixth prince pursed his lips tightly, and his chest rose and fell faster. "Go and get some cold water." "Yes." The sixth prince had some experience with having a fever in the middle of the night. After all, he had experienced it several times at night when he was younger. This is the constitution of children. They get sick for no apparent reason. When the cold water came, the sixth prince took a handkerchief from the shelf, soaked it in water, wrung it dry, and then placed it on the forehead of his little brother. The sixth prince, who was not even 8 years old, acted as calmly as if he was meeting an adult for the first time. Being taken care of by a little kid. Then a cool feeling came over his forehead, and Yeshua felt extremely comfortable. The sixth prince was helping him change his handkerchief, while imperial concubine Rome was holding his hand tightly, as if she was afraid that he would suddenly disappear, making it difficult for even a thick-skinned person like Yeshua to bear it. Mom, Xiaoming, I think I'm actually okay now. Call me sixth brother. Even at this time, the sixth prince still corrected him instinctively. As for what he said about feeling okay, the two of them simply ignored it. How can we take the patient's words seriously? But on the surface, the two of them comforted him. Yes, mother/brother believe in Shuar. Shuar will be well soon. Yeshua, this kid's body, alas. The commotion in Qiuwu Palace was so severe that soon most of the palace knew about it. No one knew what the three virtuous concubines were thinking at the moment, but Xiao Chongrong and the other two couldn't sleep. As for the queen, she felt half happy, but she herself didn't know what the other half was. What happened outside? Why is it so noisy? Wang Zichuan at the door was still hesitating, wondering whether he should wake up the emperor and report to him when such a thing suddenly happened in the palace. As a result, Emperor Jinwen woke up by himself. Perhaps because he went to bed late, Emperor Jinwen felt a little uncomfortable in his head. Now he was leaning against the head of the bed, supporting himself with one hand, rubbing his temple from time to time, with a worried look on his face. That's right. Anyone who was woken up in the middle of the night would probably be in a bad mood, and Emperor Jinwen was very restrained by not getting angry on the spot. Wang Zichuan took this opportunity to quickly tell the story again. Your Majesty, it was from Qiuwu Palace. It was the little prince. After hesitating for a while, Wang Zichuan gritted his teeth and finally finished speaking. The little prince seems to be in trouble. He said that he suddenly had a high fever in the middle of the night. Emperor Jingwen stopped pressing his temple and said, What? What happened? Why did you suddenly have a fever? I don't know either. Just when Wang Zichuan was unsure whether the emperor would go or not, the emperor in the room suddenly raised his voice. Someone, change my clothes. It looks like the emperor plans to go and take a look in person. Wang Zichuan first waved to the eunuchs and palace maids nearby, and while they were filing in, he gave orders to prepare to drive the sedan chair immediately. Emperor Jingwen's thoughts were a little confused as he opened the curtain in front of him. He saw the little was fine some time ago. How come he suddenly, perhaps because of his relationship with the Duke of Jin, his youngest son was almost the healthiest prince he had ever seen? From the time he was born to now, which was more than 2 years, he had only consulted an imperial physician once, but the result was still a mistake. Emperor Jinwen had never imagined what his youngest son would look like if he were sick. The little is so good at making people angry, nothing will go wrong. Thinking of this, Emperor Jinwen couldn't help but feel a sense of inexplicable irritation in his heart. Then he lowered his head and felt that the eunuchs and palace maids' hands and feet seemed to have become particularly clumsy today. Get out of the way, I'll do it myself. Unable to wait any longer, Emperor Jingwen kicked the man in front of him, ignored the man's kneeling begging for mercy, and started fighting himself. Perhaps because he couldn't calm down, Emperor Jingwen buttoned a wrong button. Emperor Jingwen realized it only after he sat in the sedan chair and then adjusted himself in time. Then his heart calmed down. Emperor Jinwen couldn't help but think a lot along the way. He felt that it was time to clean up the harem. After one stick of incense, the imperial carriage arrived at the gate of Qiuwu Palace. The emperor has arrived following the shouts at the door. Emperor Jinwen stepped over the threshold and walked straight towards the side hall where Yeshua lived. What happened? Why did he suddenly get sick? Hearing such a voice behind her, the imperial concubine was startled at first and subconsciously wanted to salute, but was interrupted by Emperor Jingwen. No need to be polite. Let me see how Shuara is first. Then he saw his little son with red cheeks under the quilt. After not seeing my youngest son for a few days, the baby fat on his face has disappeared. Emperor Jingwen was startled and also frightened by Yishua's current appearance. Why did you suddenly become so thin? Yishua, please stop saying he has lost weight. It's not that he is too thin now, but that he was too fat before. My figure now is just right, isn't it? While the sixth prince was changing his handkerchief, Emperor Jingwen reached out and touched his youngest son's forehead, which was very hot. Emperor Jingwen frowned tightly, and he was immediately filled with anger. What on earth is going on? This is all your fault, Your Majesty. She didn't want to say it, but after hearing this, concubine Roan couldn't hold it in any longer and tears fell down her cheeks. You arranged for Wu Yi to watch Shuar for 12 hours a day without stopping for a moment, not allowing him to do this or that, and only allowing him to study. Shuar is only 2 years old now. How can his body bear it? Was it because he pushed too hard? Emperor Jingwen tightened his grip around the beads. Wu Yi, who was standing in the dark, couldn't help but feel confused. Could it be that I really did something wrong? But he clearly didn't push him too hard. In the gap of silence between the two, concubine Roan was still crying, and every word she said was sobbing. I have been in the palace for so many years, and I only have one child. Sure, if Shuar gets into trouble this time, what will I do? At this moment, the imperial concubine wanted nothing anymore. The crown prince and the throne were not as important as her son being alive. What nonsense are you talking about? Are you blaming me? Emperor Jingwen didn't believe that his son, the grandson of the Duke of Zhan, would be so easily swept away by a high temperature. His son is the son of a dragon, blessed by the gods and Buddhas. How could it be possible that, seeing his mother crying so hard, Yishua felt bad too? He tried to persuade her, but it was of no use at all. After tossing and turning for so long, the noises around him gave Yishua a headache. He was also sick now, so he couldn't help feeling a little sleepy. But thinking back to what happened just now, he was afraid that he would scare his mother again after closing his eyes. After thinking for a while, Yeshua asked cautiously, "Father, Mother, I am very sleepy. Can I take a nap for a while?" The child's red cheeks, weak and hoarse voice, and eyelids that seemed to be about to close in the next second. Emperor Jingwen had seen such a scene many years ago, but after the child closed his eyes, he never woke up again. All of a sudden, Emperor Jingwen's heart sank, and he took a deep breath. Seeing that the child closed his eyes after he finished speaking, Emperor Jingwen and the imperial concubine immediately panicked. "No sleeping. I order you not to sleep. Do you hear me? Shuar, don't sleep. Open your eyes and look at your mother, okay?" Wu Yi, who was standing next to him, was struck by lightning when he saw this scene. "I seem to have really killed the little prince." Wu Yi lowered his head and looked at his hands. His mind went blank. Emperor Jingwen was stunned at first, as if he couldn't react to the scene before him. He gasped uncontrollably twice and then became furious. Where's the imperial physician? Why hasn't the imperial physician arrived yet? The gray-haired imperial physician was caught by Su Yu and rushed over breathlessly. Coincidentally, he just happened to hear crying and shouting coming from the side hall. He was caught off guard and his heart skipped a beat. It's over, judging from the noise. Could the little prince be dead? This. It has only been less than 2 incense sticks since the people from Qiuwu Palace came to invite us. Even if it is a high fever, it can't be so fast, right? Could it be poisoning or something else? At this moment, the imperial physician thought a lot and even began to wonder if he had been accidentally involved in the struggle in the harem. In an instant, he even thought about how to escape and save his life. What should I do? Crying out in pain in his heart, under the pressure of the emperor and the imperial concubine's eyes, the imperial physician nervously felt the little prince's pulse. After a moment, the imperial physician was stunned. It doesn't seem to be a big deal. The little prince's pulse was strong, proving that he was in good health. But seeing how nervous the emperor and the imperial concubine were, and the imperial concubine's eyes were now swollen from crying, the imperial physician felt that things were not that simple. No, look at it again. To be on the safe side, the imperial physician examined the patient several times. But what he didn't know was that, because his expression was too serious, he suspected that it was a harem struggle, and his brows were furrowed. He really couldn't tell anything else and had some doubts about his true level. Even Emperor Jingwen couldn't hold it back. His brows were tightened, and he looked shocked and angry. Finally, under the almost desperate gaze of the imperial concubine, the imperial physician gave his own judgment very cautiously. "Your Majesty, Her Highness, the little prince has caught a cold, and his high fever hadn't gone away." Then what? Just gone? After waiting for a long time, there was still no follow-up. Finally, The emperor was the first to react. If that's the case, then why is Shuar still unconscious? The imperial physician cupped his hands, hesitated for a while, and then answered, "He is not unconscious. The little prince must be too tired, so he went to bed early. The little prince is young and has a weak resistance. He falls asleep much faster than adults due to his physical condition. As for children, they may even be talking one moment and fall asleep the next moment when they turn around. This is perfectly normal." Emperor Jingwen, imperial concubine, the sixth prince. It turns out that when he said sleepy, he really meant sleepy in the literal sense. Wui on the side breathed a sigh of relief. Even though his youngest son was still sick, for some reason, Emperor Jingwen still wanted to pull him out of bed and give him a good beating. Can't you just say it clearly? Turning his head, out of sight, out of mind, Emperor Jingwen asked again, "The weather has been fine in recent days. How come the little prince got caught in the wind?" Wu Yi seemed to have remembered something, and spoke with some difficulty. "Your Majesty, there seems to be a wind vent behind the rockery where the little prince and I stayed this afternoon. It's not too far from Qiwu Palace, and it's a good place Yishua recently discovered. Anyway, with Wu Yi following him, he can go anywhere in the palace. The rockery was designed with a hole, and the breeze blew through it, making it very cool. Midsummer had just passed, and the autumn heat was prevalent. Yishua was so afraid of heat that he didn't think too much about it at the time. Even Wu Yi didn't take it seriously. After all, in his opinion, such a small breeze was not even enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. What's more, if it hadn't blown his hair up, Wu Yi wouldn't even feel that there was any wind there. Unexpectedly, such a small negligence caused the little prince to suddenly have a fever at night. Wu Yi suddenly had a better understanding of the fragility of children. Wu Yi, who had fought in the midst of swords and sabers and treated injuries as a common occurrence, and had been seriously injured and on the verge of death several times, realized belatedly that a little bit of wind could take the life of a child. It's indeed him. After hearing this, the imperial concubine couldn't help but glared at Wu Yi fiercely like a knife. Upon seeing this, Wu Yi lowered his head in silence. But in fact, it had nothing to do with the wind. After all, it was not the first day that Yishua stayed there. It was just inexplicable and a coincidence. If you look for excuses after something happens, you will always find them. The imperial physician did not delve into the matter further. He stroked his beard and directly concluded, "That's it. Children are fragile and cannot withstand the wind." Thinking of the rumors in the palace, the imperial physician said, "My lord, don't push to everything. The little prince is still young and is in the period of growth. He must not be overworked. Reading and writing are important, but if you continue like this for a long time, it may damage his foundation." It is now widely rumored that the emperor assigned the secret guard to the little prince, and that the secret guard stared at the little prince almost non-stop for 12 hours. Then the imperial physician who had never seen the little prince in person actually believed this nonsense. So in the final analysis, it is still my own problem. Perhaps he was really too harsh on his youngest son. Emperor Jingwen remained silent and played with the beads faster. Wu Yi vaguely felt that something was wrong, but he really couldn't find it. So gradually, he agreed with what the imperial physician said. Although the little prince's pulse is strong, as the imperial physician never likes to make promises. Everyone in the palace is extremely cautious. Therefore, the imperial physician said, although the little prince is not seriously ill at the moment, if the high fever does not subside in the second half of the night, he will still be in great danger. Even though the little prince is in good condition now, and the possibility of the temperature rising further in the second half of the night is not great, I still have to make it clear in advance, right? Well, I understand. Go get the medicine. Emperor Jingwen waved his hand absent-mindedly at the imperial physician and said nothing more. Now that he had finished looking at the scene and there was nothing else to do, Wang Zichuan thought that the emperor was probably about to leave, and he was about to give orders to have the carriage prepared. Who would have thought that Emperor Jingwen would simply stay in Qiwu Palace? Wang Zichuan was shocked. You know, except for the crown prince, other princes have never had such an honor. But in fact, this is not a special honor. The main reason is that the previous children's illnesses had basically nothing to do with Emperor Jingwen. Yishua is the first prince who fell ill because of Emperor Jingwen's decision, so naturally it is different. If he hadn't given such an order, the child wouldn't have behaved like this. Thinking of this, Emperor Jingwen couldn't help feeling guilty. The imperial concubine was guarding the side hall, and since the morning court would begin in an hour or two, Emperor Jingwen had to at least have a rest. It was natural for them to enter the main hall of Qiuwu Palace. After Wang Zichuan had directed the palace servants to tidy up everything, he suddenly heard these words. Wang Zichuan, tell me, is this really my fault? Wang Zichuan immediately broke out in a cold sweat. How should he answer this question? Fortunately, Emperor Jingwen did not seem to want an answer from him, and after this sentence, he did not mention it again. But just this one sentence was enough to scare Wang Zichuan. Even if the emperor really made mistakes, they were all other people's faults. Since the emperor said so, it shows how deeply shocked he was at the moment. Others didn't know. How could Emperor Jingwen not know? The youngest son almost couldn't be born because of him, and he almost died after he was born because of him. Now he is seriously ill because of him. After a long time, Emperor Jingwen slowly closed his eyes. The next morning, Yishua was still asleep when Emperor Jingwen went to court. When he left the court, he naturally headed towards Qiuwu Palace. The second prince frowned subconsciously when he saw this. He always felt that his father seemed to care too much about his younger brother. He suddenly wanted to see who his little younger brother was and why he could make his father so worried. In the past 1 or 2 years, the palace has been filled with rumors about this little prince, which are even bigger than the one caused by the imperial concubine before. But thinking that he was not familiar with this little prince, who was ill, and might get into trouble if something happened, the second prince gave up after thinking about it. Let's leave it for now and talk about this matter later. The crown prince didn't have so many concerns. After the court session, he walked together with Emperor Jingwen. Father, are you going to Qiuwu Palace to visit my little brother? That's great. I plan to go with you. Emperor Jingwen naturally would not refuse. At this time, Yishua's temperature had dropped. The imperial concubine could not bear it any longer and went to sleep in the main hall after the nanny's repeated urging. Reaching out to touch his youngest son's forehead, he found that it was not so hot anymore, and Emperor Jingwen couldn't help but feel relieved. Only at this moment did he have time to look at Wu Yi, who had also been guarding all night. Wu Yi's heart tightened, but he had no intention of resisting and immediately knelt down obediently. I am guilty, please punish me, your majesty. He was indeed guilty. After all, Emperor Jingwen had only asked him to watch over the little prince and not let him go astray, but he had not asked him to keep an eye on him for 12 hours. It was because he pushed too hard and used too much force that his youngest son fell ill. Wu Yi, in that case, you can do it yourself. Yishua vaguely heard the quarrel around him again. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Wu Yi kneeling there, ready to be punished. He was immediately shocked and sat up to plead for him without thinking. Father, wait a moment. Regardless of his dry and hoarse throat, Yishua hurriedly said, this matter has nothing to do with Wu Yi. This son accidentally caught a cold, so, ahem. Halfway through his words, Yishua couldn't bear it anymore and started coughing violently. Seeing this, Emperor Jingwen couldn't help but stepped forward to help him, and habitually patted his back with his other hand. Slow down, lie down quickly. The fever has finally subsided. What if you catch a cold again? Noticing that his stepfather's tone was exceptionally gentle, Yishua felt as if he had seen a ghost, his heart filled with fear. Is this really his father? Has he really not been replaced by someone else? Later, Yishua discovered that something even more terrifying was yet to come. Wu looked up subconsciously, then froze. He thought that the little prince would hate him after suffering such a great crime, but in the end, he was not angry at all. Wu Yi couldn't help but feel even more guilty. Your Highness, this is my fault alone. Your Highness, you don't have to beg for mercy. I am willing to accept the punishment. Even though he treated the little prince like this, he was willing to forgive him. Wu Yi turned his eyes away, not daring to look at him again. Then Wu Yi couldn't help but kowtow to Emperor Jingwen again. Seeing Wu Yi's guilty expression, which looked like he wanted to commit suicide to apologize, Yishua couldn't help but take a breath. Hiss, help, my conscience hurts. After a while, Yishua recovered and tried to persuade him. It's me who wants to go to the rockery, and it's me who wants to enjoy the breeze there. What does it have to do with you? Wu Yi lowered his eyes and said, it is my fault that I did not stop the young prince in time. Yishua, you talk as if you can really make the decision for me, and I don't even think about when have I ever listened to you. Covering his aching chest, Yishua choked, then continued to guide him. You also said that I am the master, and you are the servant. If I insist on doing it my own way, you will have no way to stop me. Can you really force me to make a choice that I don't like? Naturally. Unexpectedly, we did not think it was wrong after hearing it, but nodded very affirmatively. I only listen to your majesty and obey your majesty's orders. Your majesty has instructed me before, so when I sense danger, I can take the little prince away from there regardless of his objection. However, he did not. He failed to realize in time that the wind from the rockery would hurt the little prince's body. This was a dereliction of duty. The more he talked, the guilt in Wu Yi's heart not only did not subside, but became heavier. Yeshua stared at this scene in amazement, his whole body trembling violently. Did Wu Yi really not think carefully about the question, apart from reading stories to himself, working part-time as a storyteller, and accompanying himself on adventures? Had he really done anything else from beginning to end? He studied for an entire afternoon and his voice became hoarse. If I were adventurous, he would almost accompany me around the entire palace. When I was tired, I would have to ask him to carry me back. Moreover, if I could read a few more new words, I would have to find ways to get some reward from him. The first reward was shooting darts. The second reward was shooting flying needles. The third was shooting flying knives. The fourth, the fifth. Soon Yeshua would have learned all his hidden weapon skills, and even now Wu Yi still felt like he was coaxing a child. Even so, Wu Yi still felt that the little prince was very easy to satisfy. Just sticking 2 needles into a tree could make him excited for a long time. He was so easy to deal with. Therefore, there will definitely be no problem with such a sensible little prince. The only one with a problem is himself. Yeshua. Stop talking, stop talking. Yeshua was almost overwhelmed by guilt. Even someone as thick-skinned and black-hearted as Yeshua couldn't stand it, which shows how innocent Wu Yi is. Seeing that he really couldn't convince himself, Yeshua closed his eyes, made up his mind, and decided to use the skill that made children famous, crying. Yeshua was unreasonable and uncooperative, crying and making a fuss, and he refused to let his stepfather punish him. There is no other way. I have said everything that needs to be said. This is the only trick left. Although it's a bit embarrassing, the effect is great. You know what? This trick really works. Seeing that his youngest son was so determined and his high fever had just subsided, Emperor Jingwen was afraid that he would make a fuss and start having a fever again. He really thought about it seriously. Finally, considering his youngest son's illness, he decided to reluctantly agree to his request this time. Get up, Wu Yi. Emperor Jingwen said indifferently, since the little prince pleads for you, I will forgive you this time. Wu Yi was stunned for a long time, then slowly stood up from the ground. Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you, Your Highness. Yeshua silently covered his chest, and when he felt better, he lay down again. Wu Yi quickly left. Just as he was about to close the door, the prince, who had been silent all this time, finally couldn't help but ask a question he really wanted to know. I see that you seem to treat Wu Yi very differently. Why? If it were him, if someone was watching him like this every day, the prince would think he was lucky enough not to be crazy and would not be nice to that person. Emperor Jingwen was also somewhat curious about this question, and as the prince finished speaking, he could not help but turn his head. Yeshua thought for a moment and said sincerely, because I think Wu Yi is a good person. Isn't it true? He gave away martial arts and hidden weapons, and the part-time storyteller and bodyguard didn't complain at all. Such kind-hearted people are rare in this world. Yeshua wished that the other party would follow him like this forever. Getting a master for free, someone who can answer all kinds of difficulties and learning martial arts at any time, is really a huge profit. With Wu Yi, it doesn't matter if I walk sideways in this palace. There will be no danger. Yeshua didn't hesitate and directly sent a good guy card. Emotions surged up all at once, and then Yeshua's expression became serious, and he spoke word by word. In my heart, I regard Wu Yi as my teacher. When the prince heard this, he was shocked. Emperor Jingwen, who was standing by, was also looking at his son in shock. Facing the child's serious and somewhat solemn expression, the two of them suddenly had the same thought in their minds. Oh no, could this child have a fever that damaged his brain? At the same time, Wu Yi outside the door also widened his eyes, and his heart trembled unconsciously. Because of his training, he already had excellent hearing and vision, so even if he was standing outside, he could hear everything going on in the room clearly. When Siyu came over with the cold water, what she saw was Wu Yi standing there like a wooden stake. This lord? This lord? He suddenly woke up unexpectedly, and before the palace maid in front of him could see his expression clearly, Wu kicked his feet in panic, and the whole person instantly jumped 2 meters, jumped onto the tree next to him, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Suyu? As if frightened by the expression of his younger son/younger brother that did not seem fake, Emperor Jingwen and the Crown Prince were silent for a long time. After looking at each other, the Crown Prince decided that he must ask the imperial physician later whether there was something wrong with the prescription he prescribed, or whether his younger brother really had a brain burnt out to say such a thing. In order to dispel his idea, Emperor Jingwen explained to his youngest son, "Shuar, you must know that Wu Yi is a secret guard. I will never let him be your master." What are the secret guards? The secret guards are a group of people who are directly under the leadership of the emperor, who only obey the command of the emperor and are only responsible to the emperor. The secret guards are the private property of the emperor and are the knife in the hands of the emperor. The most taboo thing is to be contaminated by the princes. Once the secret guards are involved with the prince, it means being drawn into the vortex of the struggle for imperial power, which will pose a threat to the emperor's life. Therefore, Emperor Jingwen could never tolerate this. Can you understand what I'm saying? Yishuo nodded. Son understands. This son originally thought that he would learn martial arts from Wu Yi. The identity of a secret guard is very sensitive in itself, and the skills of a secret guard are even more sensitive. If the prince learns it, how can the secret guards prevent it? If the prince has the intention to kill, won't the emperor be in danger all the time? But since they are just children, the idea of martial arts is understandable. Emperor Jingwen couldn't help but touch his youngest son's head and said, "When you grow up and go to the upper study, there will naturally be a martial arts master to teach you." As the son of an emperor, it is not enough to just be literate. The minimum requirement is to be proficient in both civil and martial arts. The rest include riding, archery, driving, etc., not to mention the 6 arts of a gentleman. Yishuo couldn't help but smack his lips. As expected, the involution among the royal family members was so serious. When Yishuo came into contact with the 6th prince, he did not see any internal strength in him, so he guessed that he had not formally started learning yet. As for the crown prince, Yishuo didn't know martial arts when he approached him before, and now that he knows martial arts, he still hasn't found a chance to get close to him. After experimenting with Wu Yi countless times, Yishuo discovered that internal force was not so easy to detect. He needed to directly touch the opponent's dantian with his hands. The prince's belly was not so easy to touch. Yishuo was even afraid that the servants around him would catch him and chop off his claws. However, judging from the prince's behavior, Yishuo estimated that his kung fu was not very good. He is so busy every day that he wishes he could be split in half. It would be strange if he could be good at kung fu. It seems that the quality of the martial arts master that my cheap dad mentioned is worrying. Thinking of this, Yishuo asked straightforwardly, how does master in the upper study compare to Wu Yi? How can this be compared? Wu Yi is the best martial artist among the dark guards. He was carefully selected from the dark guards. Although there are also powerful martial artists among the martial arts masters, how can the masters selected from the people have the deep foundation of the royal family? In fact, it was not because Emperor Jingwen was stingy and unwilling to give it, nor was it because the emperor was on guard against his son everywhere. It was mainly because martial arts were too difficult to practice. A person's energy was always limited. There were so many people practicing martial arts in the world, and the total number was much larger than that of the royal family. How could we expect such a few people in the royal family to become the first? The probability was too low. And even if you become the first, so what? You can't rule the world by martial arts. Emperor Jingwen did not give a direct answer, but said, "The martial arts is only a minor path after all. You and your brothers are not on this path." Yishuo understood it instantly, so the meaning was quite different. It turned out that I was right to keep a trick in advance. Yishuo also noticed that his adoptive father seemed to be particularly averse to the prince learning martial arts, especially the martial arts of the secret guards. So he secretly decided in his heart that he would never let him know that he had secretly learned Wu Yi's martial arts. Facing his youngest son's disappointed expression, Emperor Jingwen changed from touching to patting and patted his head. The imperial concubine in the main hall couldn't sleep well because she was always thinking about her son. She woke up in less than half an hour. Seeing that the little guy finally woke up and the fever subsided, the imperial concubine couldn't help but hugged him in her arms. "There can't be a next time. You really scared me to death." "Mother, it's Shuar's fault." Shuo will never dare to do it again. Yeshua felt heartbroken when he noticed the faint blue color under his mother's eyes. When she thought about him standing in the limelight, the imperial concubine was so angry that she wanted to beat him up. But in the end, she couldn't do it. She just said with red eyes, "It's good that you're okay. It's good that you're okay." Yeshua felt inexplicably sad. It was really nice to be loved by his own mother. Apart from being held down and not allowed to get out of bed, he had no other problems. Even his mother fed him personally. "Your Highness has really suffered a great crime this time." Yeshua would help Wu Yi explain almost everything to anyone who came. For example, the first thing Zhao Chongrong and the other two did when they entered the room was to glare at Wu Yi, who was standing next to them, and they did so while comforting Yeshua. Yeshua had no choice but to repeat what he said before. "It's really not him. It's me who insisted on standing in the wind." However, the more he explained, the lower Wu Yi buried his head. However, this was not the most unbearable thing for Yeshua. What was most unbearable for Yeshua was that Wu Yi seemed to be particularly nice to him in recent days. Although Wu Yi still looked cold and silent on the surface, Yeshua couldn't help but fall into deep thought as he looked at the peeled fruit Wu Yi handed over to him. Even though he said that it was prepared by Su Yu and the others, Yeshua had seen his knife skills, and the skin was peeled so thinly, it was definitely Wu Yi's work. After a long time, when Yeshua was able to get out of bed and move around freely, he couldn't help but cautiously ask, "Can I not practice calligraphy today? I haven't made clay figures for a long time." I thought Wu Yi would refuse, but okay. Wu Yi nodded after a moment's silence. "That's right. I know a good place in the palace." He agreed. Yeshua felt a chill in his heart. "It's over." Wu Yi finally broke down. "This is a cold-blooded and ruthless secret guard. But now it's really not cold or cool at all. When I think of how unkind he was at the beginning, I really miss him." Yeshua whimpered and collapsed into the quilt. Wu Yi, who was standing by, couldn't help but get a little nervous when he saw this. "Are you okay, little prince?" It seemed that he was frightened by the fact that just 2 gusts of wind could make the little prince seriously ill. So now whenever there was any sign of trouble, Wu Yi would ask carefully. This is how people who have never raised a child are. Wu Yi has not yet evolved to the point where he has to check whether Yeshua's breathing is normal when he is sleeping. Ever since the high fever incident, concubine Rong forced even the young eunuchs sleeping in the outer room to move in, for fear that such a situation would happen again. This time, Wu Yi had sharp ears and discovered it in time. What about next time? If no one responded when he called out, he would have burned to death inside after a night. So no, absolutely not. He must not be allowed to sleep alone. Yeshua had no way to resist and could only agree reluctantly. After the little came, it seriously affected Yeshua's practice at night. He had no choice but to ask Su Xian to help them make a blackout curtain. When he went to bed at night, he would draw the blackout curtain so that no one could see what the person inside was doing. Although his mother teased him about this, saying that he was young but still shy and couldn't stand others even looking at him, Yeshua was so thick-skinned that he didn't feel embarrassed at all. He said openly in front of everyone, "No one can see my body except my future wife." At that time, concubine Rong burst out laughing. "How old are you? You're already thinking about getting married?" Yeshua snorted. "Age is not important. It's always right to prepare early. What if his wife cares about this? If you love her, you should naturally give her the best and not let her have any regrets." But when he thought about it, he had never found a partner who loved him in his previous life, and he was still a bachelor until his death. This life would probably be tough too, and Yeshua immediately became depressed. Alas, in life, why is it so difficult to find someone you love and who loves you back? No matter what the other person's identity is, it can be a noble lady or a commoner, a chivalrous woman or an ordinary palace maid. Yeshua doesn't care. The most important thing is that both parties love each other. As a modern man, equality and freedom have long been engraved in Yeshua's bones and have never changed even now. It's just that he couldn't change the situation alone, so he just went with the flow. As for the fact that his status as a prince destined him to have no freedom in marriage in this life, and that he could only be manipulated like a puppet, Yeshua said that this was not true. No matter what, his wife had to be the one he deeply loved. When the time comes, his stepfather will be furious, the ministers will pressure him, and the royal family will be shocked, but Yeshua won't care. After all, he was not born to please and obey these people, and his marriage will never be a bargaining chip. He didn't want to fight for that position anyway. As the saying goes, a man without desires is strong. His cheap father couldn't threaten him. If those people turned their spearheads against his beloved woman, Yeshua thought to himself that he was not so incapable of doing this. Of course, he is not even 3 years old yet, so it is too early to talk about these things. Yeshua dare not say them out loud now. After all, they are too unorthodox and can really make his stepfather mad to death. It's better to wait a little longer and let my cheap dad live a few more years in peace. Yeshua had already made plans in his mind in advance. Now everything was ready, except for a wife. But thinking about his experiences in his previous life, Yeshua instantly felt hopeless. Forget it. Don't think about it anymore. If that person doesn't show up, it will be useless even if I have thought of where my grandson will go to school. Let's take a look at Wu Yi, who is so close to us. Meeting Wu Yi's slightly nervous gaze, Yeshua collapsed on the bed and replied weakly, "I'm fine." Wu Yi opened his mouth and said hesitantly, "The clay figurine." Yeshua waved his hand. Forget it, I won't go today. If it wasn't for the crime going against the wind, it would feel too boring. Since Wu Yi is already broken, it would be better to let him break more thoroughly. My conscience aches. It can't be in vain, right? It's going to hurt anyway. So why not just call it pain in a more literal sense, so it doesn't seem so unfair? So, Yeshua not only did not stop, but intensified it. He took advantage of the time when Wu Yi was surrounded by guilt and took out almost everything he could from Wu Yi's body. Yeshua learned all of Wu Yi's skills, including the technique of launching hidden weapons, the skill of concealing breath, the skill of lightness, etc. Yeshua estimated that ordinary secret guards now knew less than he did. Just like now, Yeshua didn't need to go out of his way to investigate. As long as he was close, he could basically find out in time whether there were people on the surrounding trees and beams, and how many people there were. As for the mud on the soles of Wu Yi's boots, you have to know that the soil in the palace is not like this. The answer to where the scattered mud on Wu Yi's boots came from is self-evident. When Wu Yi habitually ran back and forth among the trees and grass, flower petals and grass debris were accidentally stuck in his hair and clothes. Yeshua once picked up half of a petal that fell from his body when he was not paying attention. Maybe it was because the petals were very small, or maybe it was because the petals were very ordinary, so Wu Yi saw them but didn't care at all. Wu Yi ignored the fact that it was precisely because the petals were ordinary that he needed to be more careful. There was not a single ordinary flower or grass in the palace, and basically all of them could be named. It happened that Yeshua had already visited the entire palace, so he could tell at a glance whether there was a particular species in the palace. Wu Yi never thought that there was actually someone who could remember so many flowers and plants in his mind. But Yeshua on the side understood it very well. When doing official work, in addition to guards and assassins like Wu Yi, there might be a special team in the secret guard team to help with the aftermath and create the scene. Otherwise, if there was no special team to deal with such things, the secret guards would have gone through countless setbacks over the years. Just when Yeshua was about to get in touch with the core secrets of the secret guards, he thought about it and stopped at the door of the gate. In the end, he chose not to go in. At least he left Wu Yi with a pair of pants and did not let him run completely. Fortunately, not long after, Wu Yi received a secret order from Emperor Jingwen, and then he packed up and prepared to leave. If he didn't leave, Yeshua estimated that he might not be able to resist touching those things. Wu Yi had no idea that it was this sudden order that saved him from danger and enabled him to successfully save the last bit of his dignity. Emperor Jingwen's secret order came very urgently, and it was estimated that there was something important for Wu Yi to do. Of course, he certainly couldn't say that to the little Prince Wu Yi. He certainly couldn't say that the emperor asked him to do something, so he left. Emperor Jingwen asked him to make up a reason, so Wu Yi really made up a reason. Looking at the secret guard who was talking nonsense in a serious manner and was about to be unable to justify himself, Yeshua could not help but fall into deep thought. As expected, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can only choose one between intelligence and loyalty. If you choose one, it will be difficult to take into account the other. It is difficult to guarantee the loyalty of smart people who know how to judge the situation, and the reason why loyal people are loyal is often because they are not smart enough. Not smart enough, but in line with the superior's wishes. After Wu Yi finished speaking, Yeshua spoke for a long time before he spoke with difficulty. You mean, your fellow villager's father came to Beijing for medical treatment recently, and because he has no relatives, he came to you for help. And then you can't stay here recently, right? Please, the secret guards are directly responsible for the Emperor's safety and cannot be involved with any forces. They are most likely orphans, so how could they have any relatives, fellow townsmen, or friends? Does Wui think he is a 3-year-old child? Wait a minute, I seem to be just a 3-year-old child. Wui, on the other hand, was still unaware of this and even nodded affirmatively. Your Highness, yes. The corners of Yishua's mouth twitched involuntarily. He really dares to admit it. It was hard to express in words what was in his mind, and then Yishua asked out of the blue, how old is your fellow countryman's father this year? Your Highness, he is 25 years old. Yishua asked again, how old are you this year? Wui was stunned for a moment. After a moment, he froze his expression and whispered, it's also 25. Wow, what a coincidence. Yishua had a wooden face. It turned out that his fellow villager was Wui himself. For someone like Wui who has to find materials from his surroundings and himself when making up stories, Yishua sincerely advises him to stop lying from now on. Just when Wui was sweating profusely and wondering if he had been discovered, he saw the little prince flipping something out from the head of the bed and throwing it towards him. Wui subconsciously reached out to catch it, and after he caught it, he discovered that it was an amulet. Your Highness, this is... After I fell ill, my mother asked my aunt outside the palace to pray at the temple. There was no other way. He had taken too many advantages of Wui, and it would be bad for him to leave empty-handed when the other party left, right? I can only ask my mother for another one later. Yishua waved his hand weakly. This amulet is for you. No, it's for your fellow villager's father. I hope that Buddha and Guanyin Bodhisattva can protect him and keep him safe and sound in the end. Yishua deliberately emphasized a few words in the middle. But in fact, the story about the father from the same hometown was all made up by him. This amulet can be given to no one except himself. Wui tightened his grip on the amulet. After a long moment, he lowered his eyes and said, Thank you, Your Highness. Without waiting for Yishua's reaction, he disappeared in a flash. Wui's departure seemed to be an episode that could not be any smaller. His departure had no impact on Shou Palace at all, and even concubine Rong breathed a sigh of relief. Although Wu Yi has been a little more lenient with his son in recent days due to the Emperor's order, with someone always there, concubine Rong still worries that her son won't be able to bear it. Fortunately, Wu Yi is finally gone now. Concubine Rong thought about it, and finally did not force her son to study anymore. Yishua was also happy and at ease, and had a great time for several months. It wasn't until the beginning of the following spring that new troubles came. Because of this matter, concubine Rong was so worried that she couldn't sleep well for several days. After the new year, he grew 1 year older. He's already 3 years old this year. If we count his age in lunar calendar, he is already 5 years old. It is time for him to go to the study. Although it seems very common that the 6th prince did not go to the upper study until he was 7 years old, in fact, the 6th prince's case was truly special. No one cared for the 6th prince in the past, and no one urged him to go to school. Later, he was taken in by imperial concubine Rome, who kept him for several months to make up for his basics. He was then sent to the imperial study, where he successfully studied with the other princes. Although the official age stipulated by the imperial study room was 6 years old for school entry, almost no princes could actually wait until they were 6 years old. It was better in the past few years. When Emperor Jingwen was still the crown prince, everyone still followed the rules and did not push their son so hard. Later, when Emperor Jingwen ascended the throne and became emperor, as the number of children in the harem gradually increased, the age at which the princes went to school became younger and younger. Some even waited until the child could speak, walk steadily, and understand what others were saying, and they sent him in directly regardless of his age. For example, the 8th prince born to concubine Da is 3 years older than Yishua. He has been studying in the upper study room for almost 3 years. In other words, he was sent in when he was just over 3 years old. Children of the royal family were born precocious, as if they were born to remember things earlier than children of ordinary families. They rarely made trouble, and Emperor Jingwen was happy to see his children become successful, so he never cared about them. Under such vicious competition, everyone will naturally become more and more competitive. And once you start, it's hard to stop. That was why the imperial concubine was worried. She also didn't want her son to lose at the starting line. When she thought of concubine Da, concubine Xian, concubine Shu, and the 4th prince, the 5th prince, the 7th prince, and the 8th prince, Imperial concubine Rong felt chest tightness, shortness of breath, and very anxious. If they weren't there, the Imperial concubine wouldn't be so anxious. If Yeshua were here, he would definitely be able to empathize with this feeling. It's just like taking an exam. She had just finished writing the multiple-choice questions and fill-in-the-blank questions, while the students around her had already finished the last 2 big questions. No one would be able to hold back if they were in her shoes. However, her son's health is also an important factor that the Imperial concubine has to take into consideration. After the previous high fever, the Imperial concubine was really scared. If it was before, she would definitely do the same as the virtuous concubine and the others and just send it over without thinking too much about it. But now, the Imperial concubine couldn't help but start thinking in her heart, Sure is only 3 years old now. Isn't it too early to send him to the upper study room now? Although he is 5 years old in terms of age, he is only 3 years old in actual age. If it happened again like before, the Imperial concubine couldn't guarantee that her son would be so lucky. Perhaps it was because concubine Rong's anxiety was too obvious. Yeshua noticed it the next day. He asked casually, and after finding out what happened, he was completely stunned. 3 years old. Here, children have to go to school at the age of 3? If it was a kindergarten, Yeshua could still understand it. A bunch of kids playing and fighting together would make a day pass by, which was equivalent to reducing the burden on busy working parents. But the upper study room here is obviously not that. Thinking of the encouragement to study that the 6th prince had recited before, Yeshua couldn't help but be amazed. This is totally not something a 3-year-old should learn. So Yeshua decisively pushed away the bowl in the nanny's hand and didn't even bother to eat. He jumped off the chair, ran over, grabbed his mother's sleeve, and looked at her eagerly. Mom. The Imperial concubine immediately softened her heart. She thought to herself that Shuar was still young, so it wouldn't matter if she delayed it for another year. So she said softly, "Okay, Shuar, don't worry, we won't go this year." Yeshua couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Mom, you were so good to Shuar. You are the best mother in the world. Yeshua did not say this intentionally to flatter his mother, but he sincerely felt this way. In such a feudal society where imperial power was supreme, women in the harem gave birth to children mostly to consolidate their own status. For them, children were just a means to climb up or consolidate their favor. It's not that they don't love them, but this love, as long as it doesn't involve life, should take precedence over rights. In simple terms, as long as you can't die, fight to the death. But there are very few people like his mother who voluntarily give up the competition simply because of his health. His mother may not know that as long as he is careful, things like last time will basically not happen, but she dare not take the risk because of such a tiny probability, which shows how deeply his mother loves him. Mom, I want to be your son in my next life, and the next life. Meeting the child's serious and determined gaze, for some reason, concubine Rong's eyes suddenly turned red. After she realized what was happening, she quickly slapped her son on the back of his hand. Pa, what are you talking about? What's the next life? The next life. It's so unlucky, just spit it out. Then the Imperial concubine couldn't help but tap his nose and said, You were just a nice person. You always say nice things to fool your mother. If you really think your mother is good, you will make her less angry with you in the future. Your mother will be thankful. That wouldn't work. What his mother hoped for, such as competing for the throne, was something he could never do. In addition to the fact that he has no ambitions here, there is also the fact that if he really shows signs of this, he and his mother should be fine, but his grandfather's family will definitely be doomed. So forget it. Yeshua came to his senses instantly, and his expression suddenly became embarrassed. Well, I don't know if it's too late to take back what I just said. No one knows a son better than his mother. Seeing him like this, the Imperial concubine immediately understood what had happened. The feeling of being touched in her heart disappeared in an instant, and she was immediately filled with anger. Well, you really lied to me. Mom, I suddenly remembered that the prince still wants to talk to me about something. I'll leave first. Bye. Come back to me. Looking at the two people playing and fighting early in the morning, the nanny next to them put the bowl in her hand back on the table and couldn't help laughing. But in fact, Yeshua was not lying. The prince did have an appointment with him, but it was not the prince who made an appointment with him, but he who made an appointment with the prince. The one-year ban is finally over. How can I not visit the East Palace? Although the prince didn't know why his younger brother had such a good impression of him, he didn't reject it. As for the future, we'll talk about it later. Yeshua had picked a random time to go there, without thinking too much about it, but he didn't expect that he would run into an unexpected person by coincidence. Judging from the patterns on the other person's red official robe, this person should be his brother's teacher. Prince's tutor? Greetings to his majesty. Just as Yeshua was stunned, the person opposite him spoke and slowly bowed to him. Although there was nothing wrong with the other party's behavior, Yeshua didn't know why, but he always felt that something was strange. Soon, he understood. His brother's teacher seemed particularly distant and cold towards him. Isn't it? Since the other party is the prince's teacher, he is naturally the one who upholds orthodoxy. To a prince like himself who is of unorthodox origin, he would naturally be rude. By the way, this was the first time in Yeshua's life that he was disliked by a teacher. In his previous life, he was the teacher's sweetheart wherever he went. Such an experience is quite novel. Yeshua was thinking at this time, and the tutor opposite him was also thinking. He had not expected that he would run into the imperial concubine's son so suddenly. He still remembered that the birth of the little prince almost made the prince's situation even more difficult. Therefore, the grand tutor naturally disliked this prince. Today, the grand tutor saw that he was behaving so recklessly and was even more disgusted. He didn't look like a prince at all. How could a prince run around and jump so disrespectfully? How could he be so disrespectful? Of course, this was not what the Taifu was most concerned about. What was most concerning to the Taifu was the child in front of him, who almost led astray the student he had taught for so long. When the child was just over 1 year old, he was already eating grapes and listening to music. What would happen if the prince also developed these bad habits? The grand tutor has always been a man of integrity. He would never show intimacy to people he doesn't like. It is already his limit if he can resist showing disgust. So after Yeshua asked him to get up, the tutor left without wasting a moment. The grand tutor didn't know the imperial concubine's plan at this time. He thought that the little prince would go to school this year. When he thought that his old rival was going to torture the little prince, the grand tutor suddenly didn't feel bored anymore, and even vaguely revealed a sense of relief. The prince did not expect that his teacher would be so hostile to his younger brother, and even unwilling to stay in the East Palace for long. Then he thought about how the teacher hated lazy and extravagant young men the most, and he felt that the teacher's behavior was very normal. But he has to comfort my little brother. After a brief thought, the prince ordered people to fetch the new tribute fruits from the south. On the other side, in the Qingjung Hall, Emperor Jingwen soon learned the news that his youngest son would not be attending school this year. Hearing this, he just frowned slightly and did not take it to heart. In his opinion, it is a good thing for his younger son to start school later. It took him 2 full years to finally reach a delicate balance with the Duke of Jin. Under the circumstances, Emperor Jingwen himself did not want this balance to be destroyed. Also, my youngest son had already shown extraordinary intelligence when he was over 2 years old. Once he starts school, his development will surely be extremely rapid. Emperor Jingwen was very conflicted. He hoped that his youngest son would be successful, but at the same time he was worried that he would be too successful. In his opinion, it was inevitable that his youngest son was extremely gifted. Once he entered the upper study room, he would definitely learn everything. He never considered the second possibility at all. So Emperor Jingwen decided to take the cold approach. He wanted to see how the Duke of Jin and the imperial concubine would react. Anyway, the Duke of Jin and the imperial concubine will always take action. He could also take this opportunity to test how patient the Duke of Jin was and whether he would really behave himself this time. If the Duke of Jin is particularly anxious, then. And so, Emperor Jingwen waited and waited. When Yeshua was 3 years old, Emperor Jingwen was sitting firmly on the Dio Yutai. T/L. Sitting firmly on the Dio Yutai equals sitting at ease in a fishing boat despite storms. Idiom, to stay calm during tense situation, a cool head in a crisis. When Yeshua was 4 years old, Emperor Jingwen couldn't help but sigh that the Duke of Jin and the imperial concubine were really patient. When Yeshua was 5 years old, Emperor Jingwen began to frown. When Yeshua was 6 years old, and it was time for school to start in the spring, Emperor Jingwen couldn't help but walk around the Qingjung Hall twice. When Yeshua was 7 years old, Emperor Jingwen would look outside from time to time while reviewing memorials. Even the young beside him could clearly feel the emperor's anxiety, not to mention Wang Zichuan, who had followed Emperor Jingwen for so many years. Wang Zichuan served carefully and prayed desperately in his heart, hoping that God would bless him and that it would succeed this year. Soon, a figure walked in quickly. The moment he saw that person, Emperor Jinwen put down the imperial pin in his hand. "Your Majesty, I pay my respects to you." "Your Majesty, please." "All right, stop wasting time. Just tell me the result. Just tell me, has the ninth prince enrolled this year?" Caught off guard, the young who came hurriedly had a frozen expression on his face, and then he reported the result of his investigation in a trembling voice. "Your Majesty." "No, no." After saying that, he didn't even dare to look up. The moment he finished speaking, Emperor Jinwen lost control and almost broke the armrest of the chair. "The ninth prince is already 9 years old this year. What on earth do they want to do?" The emperor thought about it over and over again and felt that this would not work. The emperor had originally planned very well to see how the Duke of Jin would react and then make a choice. But now, even someone as thoughtful as Emperor Jinwen could no longer sit still. He realized that if he didn't stop her, the imperial concubine would really keep dragging her feet and not allow the ninth prince to enroll in school. But if he just moves like this, he would always feel like he is inexplicably inferior to the Duke of Jin. Emperor Jinwen sat on the dragon throne with an uncertain expression. Wang Zichuan on the side was thinking, even though the little prince has grown up, the situation has not improved, but has become more serious. At the beginning, the little prince was just simply naughty, but now, His Majesty must be worried to death. In the end, Emperor Jinwen still felt that compared to losing to the Duke of Jin, it was more intolerable for the royal family, especially his own son, to have an illiterate person who could not read a single word. The former only made him feel uncomfortable, but the latter was a real harm. Emperors are generally pragmatic, so Emperor Jinwen closed his eyes, gritted his teeth, and became extremely annoyed, almost yelling out word by word, "Come, prepare the carriage to the Qiuwu Palace. No matter what, the ninth prince must enroll in school this year." At the same time, over in the East Palace, Yushua seemed to sense something and couldn't help sneezing. Achoo! The noise startled the child next to Yushua. After realizing what was happening, the child looked over at him worriedly. "Ninth uncle, are you okay?" "It's okay. It's okay. The ninth uncle is in good health." Yushua waved his hands, not caring at all. Now that he has already mastered the internal strength, ordinary minor illnesses like colds and fevers can no longer affect him. Seeing the child in front of him so cute, Yushua couldn't help but rub his head, which naturally resulted in the child's protest. "Ninth uncle." Looking at the child who couldn't help but jump, Yushua smiled and dodged, while his thoughts gradually drifted away. From 3 to 7 years old, there are still many changes in 4 years. For example, he has successfully been listed in the Imperial Edict and officially obtained his own ranking. As he grew older, the sixth prince felt a growing sense of urgency, especially since he would gradually begin to get involved in government affairs in 2 years. He was studying very hard, and except for the New Year holidays, he hardly had any time to stop. Even though Yushua lived with him in Qiuwu Palace, he often didn't see him. And on the prince's side, Yushua had just celebrated his 3rd birthday. In the same year, the prince, who had just turned 18, got married. The woman he married was none other than the daughter of his teacher, the Grand Tutor. Jin is very different from her old-fashioned father. Jin is very well-behaved and has a gentle and generous personality. Even when facing a naughty boy like Yushua, she can be very patient and almost never loses her temper. Yushua often comes to the East Palace and makes trouble there, but she never gets angry. Yushua observed carefully and confirmed that she was really not angry, and she was not saying one thing in front of others and another behind their backs. According to the Crown Princess, she had never seen such a lively child before, and just watching him playing around made her feel more relaxed. This is true. Yushua is the most comfortable person in the whole palace. Perhaps because she was too harshly disciplined since childhood, the Crown Princess was particularly envious of free children. Due to the rules, she could not run, jump, or laugh, so she particularly liked to watch others run, jump, and laugh, which almost the Grand Tutor. At first, Yushua was still thinking that he must not act the same way as before after the Crown Prince got married. After all, disturbing the young couple would be struck by lightning. But seeing the Crown Princess's behavior, Yushua no longer had any scruples. Not long after the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess got married, the Crown Princess became pregnant and gave birth to a child the following year. Now, for years have passed, and the child is 3 years old. Look, that's the kid next to Yushua. The little kid in front of him is the legitimate son of the Crown Prince. There is no one more legitimate than him. Perhaps it was for the sake of the Grand Tutor, or perhaps it was because the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess knew each other when they were young and had a very close friendship. So there was almost no one else in the Crown Prince's room before he married the Crown Princess, and no one was brought in for 2 years after he married her. Last year, he took in 2 new concubines. Although Yeshua himself could not understand it, the world was in such a state today that the prince could not be blamed. Yeshua was an outsider, so naturally he had no right to interfere in the prince's family affairs, so he stopped paying attention to it. Yeshua just has a good relationship with the little kid. Because her husband was the crown prince, her son was destined from birth to never be able to do whatever he wanted in his life like ordinary children. The crown princess knew this clearly, so she wanted him to be happier when he was young. In this palace, is there anyone who is more comfortable than the little prince back then and now the 9th prince? Of course not. So after her son was over 1 year old and could walk steadily, the crown princess began to allow the two to interact. This method seemed to be very useful. Her son had already begun to show signs of maturity when he was 1 year old. He probably learned it from his father. A good child would eat and sleep according to the rules. This reminded the crown princess of her own childhood. But after the crown princess handed her son over to the 9th prince, things gradually became different. At first, the little prince was a little reserved and at a loss. But as he came into contact with more new things with his uncle, he gradually relaxed. The little grandson of the emperor, Yi Sun, never knew before that mud could be so much fun. There are also kites that can fly into the sky, peaches in spring, crickets in summer, even growing garlic is so interesting. Yeshua gave almost all the fruits of his labor in the past few years to his adopted nephew, without any reservation. He felt that it was pitiful for the child who was so excited even to see the hydroponic garlic sprouting. Speaking of which, he seemed quite pitiful. How old was he now? He was only 7 years old, and he was forced to help his brother take care of his children. During this year or so, the little grandson of the emperor almost went crazy playing with him. Whenever the Grand Tutor heard about these things, he became so angry that he almost vomited blood. If it weren't for his status as a prince, Yeshua always felt that the Grand Tutor would definitely kill him personally for leading his grandson astray. Look, in the main hall, the Grand Tutor and the Crown Princess started arguing again, and the content of the argument was nothing more than the same few sentences, that is, what the Grand Tutor thought the little emperor's grandson looked like. And the Crown Princess, having seen a child like Yeshua, also wanted to make her son's life easier when he was young. Yeshua still clearly remembered the look of disbelief on the Grand Tutor's face when the Crown Princess argued with her father for the first time in her life. At first, the Crown Princess was a little nervous and afraid. After all, talking back to her father was considered a heinous crime. But after doing it many times, she gradually got used to it. Anyway, no matter what, the period before her son arrives at the study is the Crown Princess bottom line. Nonsense, absolutely nonsense. I think you have lost your mind. The Grand Tutor really couldn't understand what kind of magic potion the 9th prince had fed his daughter. It had only been a short time, and the once gentle and quiet daughter dared to argue with her father. Also, why hasn't that 9th prince gone to school yet? The Grand Tutor has been looking forward to this for 4 years, and has been disappointed every year. Now he has become numb. The key point is that because of his daughter, the Taifu can often see the 9th prince in the East Palace. He can't avoid him even if he wants to. Every time he sees him, the Taifu can't help but feel hurt internally. How can there be such a kid in the world? Anyone who becomes this child's teacher will be in dire straits for the rest of his life. If one day the 9th prince finally leaves the Eastern Palace and goes to school in the study, the Grand Tutor will certainly ask the servants to go to the market to buy a set of 2,000 firecrackers and set them off to celebrate. The Crown Princess, can you please sober up a little? The Taifu tried hard to suppress his rage and spoke earnestly. The Crown Princess didn't buy it, and just said calmly, "Father, don't worry. I know what to do." Sense of propriety. If she really had some sense, would she let his grandson hang out with the 9th prince? The Taifu was so angry that his head hurt. Seeing that he could not persuade him, he left in anger countless times. As a result, as soon as he went out, he ran into the 9th prince who was bringing his grandson. There were traces of mud on the little prince's body, and his hands were not clean either. headed toward the designated location with more than 20 elite night watchmen, including Rain. This time, the Night Watcher's army was responsible for the north side of the valley, which was furthest from Flashgold Town, so time was quite tight. Nightingale Forest. Inside a hidden valley, Savage Claw, feasting heartily on a young beast, glanced upwards at several eagles in the sky with his green oily eyes. These eagles seemed a bit odd, constantly circling and calling directly above him, but he didn't care much about them. The place he occupied was a carefully chosen valley with 3 different exits leading outside. Even if humans came seeking revenge, they could do nothing to him, and he might even catch more meat to enjoy. If the Iron Men came, he would just burrow deep into the forest, where humans would not dare to follow. Woof woof woof. A burst of barking suddenly arose from the western entrance of the valley. This made Savage Claw immediately vigilant, and he put down the pitiful young beast, looking up to see. If he was not certain about the eagles, the barking confirmed that humans had indeed tracked him down. Suddenly, a slim and lean greyhound burst out of the dense woods. Upon catching sight of Savage Claw, it began barking excitedly. If not for their significant difference in size, the greyhound would have surely charged at him. Such an annoying little thing, a human's lapdog. Savage Claw's paws dug in, instantly sending dirt flying and creating a small depression in the ground. His massive form shot forward like an arrow toward the greyhound. Whimper the greyhound's eyes filled with terror, and it immediately turned around to return through the dense forest the way it came. Although the greyhound was not powerful in combat, its long and strong limbs made it very fast when running. Even though Savage Claw was faster, the dense trees in the forest made it difficult to kill the greyhound immediately. Common language, found it. It's right here. Noisy human voices followed. Savage Claw realized the situation seemed to be turning sour. He rolled his green oily eyes and halted his chase, quickly turning around to head for another exit at the south side of the valley. He quickly left the noisy commotion behind, which pleased Savage Claw. These foolish humans, making such a fuss and ending up with nothing, they must have quite the expression on their faces. Tomorrow or the day after, I'll make a comeback with a counterattack. Heh. This time, I didn't get to eat the freshest, juiciest human females, a regret I must remedy. As Savage Claw hurried along, thoughts like these crossed its mind, its eyes a gleaming, cunning green, flashing with sly satisfaction. Woof woof woof. Suddenly, a chorus of barking erupted from the entrance to the southern valley. This caused Savage Claw to change color and come to an immediate halt, leaving behind 2 deep furrows in the ground. The humans know about this southern exit too. Savage Claw glanced hatefully in that direction and then made for the northern exit of the valley. It was their last way out. At this moment, Savage Claw's state of mind was no longer the calm and serene one it had had at the start. But it wasn't entirely in a panic either. As it ran, it muttered, "Lucky for me, I was prepared in advance, or else I would have been caught in a pincer attack by the humans." As Savage Claw neared the northern exit of the valley, it deliberately slowed down, listening carefully for a while, and hearing no dogs barking, revealed a satisfied smile. Stupid humans. You think you can catch your grandpa, Savage Claw? Dream on. Ha. After that, Savage Claw sprinted towards the northern exit. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. A dense volley of arrows gave Savage Claw a huge fright, but luckily it was quick to react. Its large and strong body immediately produced a light cyan flow of air, and its speed surged dramatically, allowing it to dodge most of the arrow storm. Savage Claw dashed behind a large tree for cover, peering intently ahead. There, at the northern exit of the valley, loomed several humans clad in leather armor, bows in hand, and among them, leading the group, was an unusual Ironskin. This team was none other than the Night Watcher's army, led by the Ironskin Hamilton, the Sword and Shield Knight. Although the sun had just risen, casting a dim morning light, within the Nightingale Forest, fog blurred the vision, and dense vegetation under the patchy tree shadows meant visibility wasn't all that great. Fortunately, Rain now possessed the passive ability Dark Vision, which allowed him to clearly make out the vicious humanoid jackal wolf figure. Standing over 2 meters tall, its limbs were long and powerful. It wore a shabby mix of leather and chainmail armor that seemed to be cobbled together from various human mercenaries, put on in a hurry and fitting poorly. The creature didn't hold any weapons, but its claws gleamed coldly. The child servant it had been carrying was nowhere to be seen, its fate easily imagined. While Rain and his companions observed the beast, Savage Claw was sizing them up as well. Ironskins are too tough to deal with, and there are so many human archers around. This made Savage Claw extinguish the idea of a fight to the death. It immediately turned and rushed towards the valley's southern exit. Faced with an iron skin, it would rather confront a horde of ordinary human soldiers. But as Savage Claw approached the southern exit, it was shocked to find there stood another iron skin, wielding a dual-handed greatsword, alongside dozens of soldiers in chainmail, nasal helmets, and holding various weapons. At that moment, Savage Claw's heart plummeted. Not giving up hope, it made a mad dash for the first exit, the western side of the valley, only to find yet another iron skin, with a sword and shield, and a group of human soldiers there as well. Savage Claw was in despair. The next second, a fierce look crossed Savage Claw's face. Now, leaving through the western and southern exits is out of the question. There's still human territories. Who knows what other traps await me there? So the only way out is the northern valley exit, back into the depths of the forest, where I can catch my breath. Having made up its mind, Savage Claw started to sprint with all its might, a gray-black shadow once again dashing at high speed towards the northern exit, where Hamilton and Rain were positioned. Rain had seen from afar, the vegetation in the distance collapsing as if cut down, and a familiar, towering figure appeared again. Seeing the aggressive demeanor of the other, Rain immediately became alert, thinking to himself, this is bad. The fact that the opponent had returned to this valley's exit meant they must have chosen this spot as their breakthrough point. This savage werewolf, in its life or death situation, would likely fight with all its might to break free. A fierce battle was probably about to ensue. Rain promptly accessed his panel and focused his attention on the first page of attributes. Name, Rain Carlin. Occupation, Blacksmith LV1, 5 out of 100. Out of Night Watchman LV1, 1 out of 100. Constitution, 6 Strength, 10 Agility, 9 Spirit, 9 remaining attribute points, 1 remaining skill points. Once since changing his job to Night Watchman, his Strength, Agility, and Spirit had each increased by 1 point, his Strength reaching 10 points, and Agility had been boosted to 9 points. Considering the special recovery effect when adding attribute points, Rain still hadn't used the remaining 1 attribute point. Instead, he used the last skill point on a core skill Blacksmith Strength. Instantly, the icon that resembled Popeye with prominent biceps lit up around the edges, and the row of small text underneath changed, displaying core skill, Blacksmith Strength LV2, active, Blacksmith Strength LV2, active, effect. When the skill is activated, your strength increases slightly. Note, the effect of the skill increases the host's strength by a certain ratio, and its duration is proportional to the host's constitution and spiritual power. Rain read the details meticulously and noticed that besides the change from LV1 to LV2, the description for Blacksmith Strength had replaced the word slightly with slightly. It seemed that Blacksmith Strength at LV2 would further increase the strength enhancement. Although he didn't know exactly how much the enhancement was, it would definitely be stronger than the previous roughly 20%, perhaps 30%, or even more. Fire arrows. Facing the swiftly approaching savage werewolf, Hamilton swung his knight's long sword forward fiercely, issuing the command. Instantly, including Rain, more than 20 elite night watchmen shot their arrows eagerly. However, the savage werewolf, covering its eyes with one thick arm, quickly changed its position, moving not only faster but also erratically left and right, making it hard to target. This move immediately allowed it to dodge most of the arrows. Only 2 arrows hit, but due to the plated armor and dense, wire-like muscles protecting it, they did not deeply. Roar. After forcefully snapping the arrows on its left shoulder and right chest, the werewolf roared furiously and surged straight toward Hamilton. Bring it on! Hamilton, facing the high-speed attack of the savage werewolf, was undaunted and even slightly excited. Since transitioning from the Imperial Army to the local officer of Flash Gold Town, Hamilton had not encountered such a ferocious opponent for a long time. Hamilton felt his blood start to boil. As the distance between them closed, the elite night watchman's arrows continued to be dodged by the opponent. Just as Hamilton felt the wind of the werewolf's charge hitting his face, his sharp eyes detected a sinister smile on the face of the savage werewolf. This immediately made Hamilton's heart skip a beat. Sure enough, a sudden change occurred. Just as the savage werewolf was about to engage Hamilton, it suddenly turned 90 degrees and, with a powerful side leap, charged toward the night watchman elites on Hamilton's left instead. It turned out that Savage Claw's main advantage was exploiting Hamilton's cumbersome iron shell, which couldn't keep up with its speed. Cast nets. Hamilton roared from behind. Suddenly, several nets with a diameter of 3 to 4 meters were thrown directly at the werewolf. Hamilton had already planned a contingency, but Savage Claw seemed utterly unfazed, even showing a hint of disdain. On its pair of sharp claws, a faint blue aura began to swirl. The next second, swish, swish. After 2 incredibly swift claw strikes, the rope net instantly fell apart. They hadn't expected the robust net soaked in linseed oil to be so easily torn apart by the opponent's sharp claws, leaving everyone in shock. The next second, the fierce werewolf-human hybrid charged into the crowd and struck again with its claws, splattering blood. Although 2 elite night watchmen tried their best to defend with their swords, they were heavily thrown 4 to 5 meters away by the Savage Claw's immense strength, presumably breaking several ribs each. The severe injury of his subordinates immediately filled Hamilton with fury. He hadn't expected this ferocious werewolf-human hybrid to have also awakened a special transcendent trait Voidbreaker. This innate ability not only increased its own movement speed, but also enhanced its slashing effect, which was why the net was so easily torn apart. If they let this cunning werewolf-human hybrid escape, Flashgold Town would surely face a brutal retaliation from the creature. Just as Savage Claw was escaping towards the Northern Valley exit with a smug look, Hamilton responded swiftly. He heaved his shield and threw it hard at the werewolf-human hybrid, the flat shield spinning rapidly and whistling towards the creature's back. The Iron Man strike clearly caught Savage Claw by surprise, forcing it to dodge to the side and slightly slow down. But immediately after, another dark object rapidly flew towards it. Clang! Savage Claw forcefully struck it away, but its speed was further reduced. It was then that it realized the object was actually the Iron Man's night helmet. Meanwhile, the Night Watchman had once again released a dense volley of arrows at the exit. This forced Savage Claw to move sideways to dodge again. Just then, Hamilton had seized the opportunity and caught up, his right hand clutching the Knight's longsword as he hit Savage Claw. Savage Claw was infuriated. Could the Iron Man, without shield and helmet, possibly block its claw attack? It didn't believe so. Savage Claw planned to quickly kill the Iron Man in front of it and then make its escape. Otherwise, being tangled by such a stubborn opponent, it feared it might not be able to escape the valley before getting surrounded by the other 2 Iron Men. With a long howl, Savage Claw targeted Hamilton's head with its killer move Fury Claw combo. Swish, swish, swish. The high-speed claw strikes, coupled with its special ability, were so fast that almost stationary afterimages could be seen, its attacking power extremely formidable. Savage Claw had once killed a 5-meter-long ferocious jungle lizard with this killer move. It didn't believe a shieldless Iron Man could withstand it. But Hamilton didn't dodge or retreat. Instead, he roared. Heave. Huge strength. Hamilton's arms suddenly swelled, and he followed with an upward slash, swinging the Knight's longsword like a bolt of silver lightning directly at Savage Claw's body. This scene left Rain and the other Night Watchmen stunned and their blood boiling all at once. Attack against attack. Killer move against killer move. In their eyes, the 2 dark figures collided heavily, then both blood splattered and flew backward. For bloody marks appeared on Hamilton's thick chest armor, extending from the upper right to the lower left of his abdomen. Without the knight armor's protection, the opponent's strike surely would have split Hamilton open. Meanwhile, the ferocious werewolf-human hybrid was even more severely wounded, its right hand tightly clutching its left forearm, which Hamilton's slash had cleanly severed. At that moment, fresh blood was spurting from the smooth cut. Savage Claw knew that if it didn't run now, it was doomed. As the blood continued to drain from its left arm, it felt its strength rapidly fading. Savage Claw could no longer care about anything else, mustering its remaining strength to rush towards the Night Watchman blocking its escape path. 3 Night Watchmen were instantly sent flying by the 300-plus-pound Savage Claw. Next, it saw a particularly small human in front of it, a hint of joy appearing at the corner of Savage Claw's mouth. If it could just knock this little guy aside, it would be able to make its escape to freedom. The little one in front of Savage Claw was none other than Rain. As the ferocious werewolf-like creature charged at him, Rain saw that it had been seriously injured by Hamilton, with one arm severed. How much of its strength remained? 50% or 60%? No matter what, it was certain that the enemy's strength had greatly diminished. Moreover, Rain didn't need to defeat it. He just had to delay it for a few seconds. Then the elite night watchman would immediately surround it, leaving no escape. Isn't it dangerous to intercept it? Of course, it's dangerous. Rain, who possessed the passive ability Danger Perception LV1, felt alarms going off in his heart at this moment. But when Rain thought of the scene in the servant dormitory the night before, he shuddered with fear. Because, if such a vicious monster were to lurk around Flashgold Town every day, Rain didn't know when misfortune would befall him or descend upon his family and friends. Although Rain was still far from being a formal knight, and couldn't unlock the body's limits to the extent Hamilton could, Rain had other trump cards. To delay the foe for a few seconds, he was fairly confident. Seeing Rain actually planning to confront the enemy, Hamilton couldn't help but shout anxiously, "Rain, get out of the way." Even though letting the ferocious werewolf-like creature escape would have serious consequences, Hamilton was even less willing to see a promising young man die tragically in front of him. Hamilton and the other elite night watchmen immediately ran at full speed towards the werewolf-like creature. Even though Rain's plans were well thought out, only when he truly faced the ferocious werewolf-like creature did he realize he had oversimplified the situation. The ferocious face, indifferent eyes, and towering stature alone instilled fear in the heart of anyone who hadn't stepped into the transcendent realm. Luckily, Rain had killed criminals before and experienced real combat. Otherwise, he would have lost the battle before it even began. Blacksmith strength. With a solemn expression, Rain focused his mind and silently invoked blacksmith strength. As he released this core skill, the strength value displayed on his panel surged from 10 to 10, plus 4. The next second, a thick warm current violently pumped from Rain's heart, like an overdose of adrenaline, accelerating his bloodstream and causing the muscle fibers throughout his body to tense up like strands of steel wire in an instant. Rain felt as if a ferocious tiger had suddenly awakened inside him. He had never felt so powerful before. Leap slash. With a roar, Rain gripped the sword with both hands, leaped high into the air, and slashed downward like lightning at the towering ferocious werewolf-like creature in front of him. As he was usually trained with the heavy dual-handed greatsword, this time, due to weapon limitations, he could only use the more nimble sword. Even though the power was greatly diminished, the speed had almost doubled. In the moment when the injured Savage Claw was astonished that the little one in front of it dared to swing a sword at it, it suddenly felt like a formidable beast being provoked by an ant. Blazing with anger, Savage Claw immediately swung its intact right claw at its opponent with a rapid. Savage Claw only saw a flash of silver before it sharply felt a stabbing pain coursing through its right claw. At the same time, it felt a force not much weaker than its own power transmitted from the opponent's sharp sword. Then, Savage Claw incredulously discovered that it was actually knocked back several meters by the seemingly insignificant Little One's strike. Rain, having been flung by Savage Claw's claw strike, flew backwards at an even faster speed than before. Thud, thud, thud. Rain retreated more than 10 steps, his face flushing with the exertion of clashing against the strike. The next second, he suddenly raised his head, his eyes burning as he stared at the heavily injured ferocious werewolf-like creature in front of him. It was too unexpected for him. He had actually managed to block it unharmed. What did this mean? 2 words: can fight. If before the battle Rain was overwhelmed with emotions like worry, fear, and hesitation when facing such a fierce and powerful opponent, after clashing head-on, all those chaotic emotions were swept away from his mind. At this moment, his confidence surged. Rain's strike had the Night Watchman elites following closely behind him, looking on in astonishment. They had clearly witnessed the monstrous werewolf's strength being on par with that of Lord Hamilton, a proper knight. Yet Rains had caused the creature to retreat, almost blinding them with surprise. Could it be that the werewolf's strength had declined so much that only 1/10 remained, allowing Rain to easily exploit a weakness? Rain's attack also caught Lord Hamilton's eye. Though he too was severely injured, he immediately clamped his muscles tight to stem the bleeding and, with a forceful push off the ground, sent dirt flying with a. Seizing the opportunity provided by Rain's interception, Lord Hamilton mustered all his strength and, lifting his longsword, it straight at the back of the monstrous werewolf. Alarm bells rang in the Savage Claw's mind, and as soon as it felt the strong gust of wind behind it, it knew something was wrong and instinctively turned around, counterattacking with a claw strike. But the only claw it could use at that moment, its right, had been deeply gashed by Rain, visible to the bone, significantly reducing the power of its attack. Lord Hamilton's sword pierced Savage Claw's left chest, blood immediately seeping out, but in the next second, he too was sent flying by its counterstrike. This time, Lord Hamilton could no longer contain the wounds on his body. Midair, you could see multiple wounds gush out blood, followed by a thud as he heavily fell to the ground. Seeing the Tin Man possibly beaten to the brink of death by its Savage Claw couldn't help but feel a surge of joy. But before that joy could be fully expressed on its face, it sensed another gust of wind coming from behind its head. This time, with its injuries further aggravated, it found its body couldn't keep up with the commands of its brain. As it turned its head, Savage Claw saw only a beautiful arc of silver flash before its eyes. The next second, all Savage Claw felt was a tickling sensation in its neck, followed by the sensation of something wet running out. Then a searing pain hit. Savage Claw clutched at its neck, trying to speak, but could only produce gurgle bubble sounds as blood frothed from its mouth and the ferocity in its eyes gradually faded, leaving them lifeless. Thud. Savage Claw collapsed to the ground. Its large and muscular body continued to twitch as the grass was quickly stained red with blood. Even the strongest life force can't last long when both carotid arteries in its neck are sliced open, spraying blood like fountains. At that moment, Rain was standing on the spot, taking deep breaths, his chest heaving like bellows. The life and death struggle, although it lasted mere seconds, demanded his utmost effort with every move. In the instant he launched his leap slash, Rain remembered Klea's teachings and altered the angle of his sword swing from a vertical top to bottom cut to a horizontal slash from right to left. Because from the moment he first collided with the monstrous werewolf, he realized that even with his massive strength of 14 points, he couldn't sever the creature's claws, a testament to its incredible toughness. So, considering that the skull is inherently the hardest bone in the body, Rain opted for a horizontal cut. After all, the neck is much softer. The clash between Rain, Savage Claw, and Hamilton was over in a flash, and the night watchmen who were nearby hadn't even covered 2 steps before the fight was already over. At this time, they were all gaping at the scene before them, especially given Rain's small frame displaying such explosive power and the fearless momentum of someone who dares to fight and risk it all, giving them the feeling that a little kitty had suddenly transformed into a roaring tiger. Good. Ha ha ha. Cough, cough. Lord Hamilton burst into laughter upon seeing Rain taking down Savage Claw, but his injured lungs soon made him cough uncontrollably. Just now, Lord Hamilton had confirmed Rain's heritage, or rather his origin, as soon as he witnessed the sword technique Rain had used. This technique and momentum are clearly the leap slash from the giant bear sword technique. It seems his teacher must be Perez without a doubt. But this kid's strength has increased too quickly, hasn't it? Or is it that this ferocious werewolf has been severely injured by me, so its strength has significantly decreased? The other elite night watchmen were all staring at Rain with faces full of amazement. Only then did they realize that the boy, who was a head shorter than them, was hiding the strength of a tiger in his lean body, and his explosive power was incredibly astonishing, capable of sending the hundreds of pounds heavy ferocious werewolf flying with a single. This small stature, such a simple and brutal way of fighting. But it really got the blood boiling. My lord, are you all right? Soon, 2 night watchmen quickly approached and helped Hamilton up, promptly treating the wounds on his body. Just wrap it up with bandages for now. I won't die. Seeing that their supervisor was unharmed, the night watchmen once again focused their attention on Rain. Good kid, it's Rain, right?
Not sure if you're here right now, but
an elite night watchman walked up with a smile and clapped Rain on the shoulder.
So focused
Rain, that was amazing. I heard from Lord Hamilton that you were about to join us.
See a message.
Remember to come to our squad. I am. Get lost. Wayluin, you're already poaching people before Rain has even joined? Aren't you shameless? Yeah, fair competition. Let Rain choose himself. Seeing the night watchman's enthusiasm, Rain responded with a smile to each one. At that moment, noises came from 2 other directions, with the barking of the greyhounds getting closer and closer. Clearly, the 2 teams from Habsburg Manor were about to reach this location. This made Rain's gaze sharpen as he pondered. It's best not to show up in front of the manor's higher-ups yet. Clea had warned him of this before, and Rain himself wanted to keep a low profile too. He really didn't want to get involved in the internal struggles of the Habs Earl family's offspring. Right away, Rain stepped forward 2 paces to Hamilton, who was being bandaged up. Lord, I would like to return to Flash Gold Town in advance. After all, my reason for coming this time. Rain stopped halfway through his sentence, but successfully misled Hamilton. Hamilton understood immediately because he also didn't want Perez to see that he had taken
Hey, sorry, are you okay? What the hell, Hamish? What? What are you doing? Why are you parked there? I was reversing. Sorry, are you saying that this is not my fault? Yeah, I was moving. Why didn't you get out of the way? You're lucky I'm feeling charitable and I'm not going to press charges. No. This isn't a highway, it's a car park. I have every right to be sitting on it. Listen, you're a good kid. You just need to use your brain a bit more next time. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, sorry. No, it's okay. It's all good. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to do the presentation tomorrow, so you're going to have to do it by yourself. Oh, why? Well, because you forgot to remind me to do my bit, and I'm not going to do it tonight because I'm going out with the boys, obviously. Yeah, that's fair enough. Jesus, Hamish, get it together, man. Yeah, all right, sorry. No.
his proud protege. Then, Hamilton nodded and said, Rain, Wayluin, you two are responsible for taking these few injured brothers back to Flash Gold Town first. Also, everyone pay attention, do not reveal that Rain was the one who ultimately killed the ferocious werewolf. To the outside world, just say it was I who killed it. The elite night watchmen looked between their supervisor and Rain and, seeing Rain's indifferent expression and complete lack of objection, they knew there must be some secret between the two, so they echoed loudly, as you command, my lord. Rain couldn't help but smirk inwardly upon seeing this. Reading people and situations really was an essential workplace skill. So, before the Manor's teams arrived, Rain and a few other night watchmen quickly left the valley first. On the way back, Rain finally had the opportunity to check the system notifications. Your skill, giant bear sword technique, has improved. Experience plus 157. You have experienced a battle. Night Watchman professional experience points plus 87. The giant bear sword technique advanced directly from LV1 to LV2, reaching the level of LV2, 54 out of 300. Especially for the leap slash, Rain now had many more insights in his mind. It was with the leap slash that he had killed the injured ferocious werewolf with a single strike. And seeing the Night Watchman profession level at LV1, 87 out of 100, now nearly halfway filled, Rain was slightly startled. Indeed, this once again proved that life and death struggles are a shortcut to raising one's combat profession level. Unfortunately, it's just a bit too dangerous. Perhaps, once my own strength increases a bit more, I could consider taking on some of those bounty quests. Not only do they offer high rewards, but they can also improve my combat profession level. Two birds with one stone. Moreover, through this battle, Rain also roughly understood what the average strength of a formal knight might be. From the process of the battle, it seemed that, after Hamilton exerted his full strength, he was roughly equal in strength to that ferocious man-wolf over 2 meters tall. Even after I activated Blacksmith Strength LV2, I was still slightly weaker than the ferociously transformed man-wolf in its grievously injured state. Thus, it is reasonable to speculate that the strength of the ferociously transformed man-wolf, when quantified, is about 15-16 points if it is seriously injured. In its prime, it should be around 20 points. Therefore, the strength of a formal knight should not be too far off that, almost 3 to 4 times that of an ordinary person. No wonder Clea said that the path of knighthood is a process of breaking through one's own limits. To reach a strength 3 to 4 times that of an ordinary person does indeed signify surpassing a certain limit of the human body. In his previous life, Rain had seen a news story where it was said that the muscle strength of the human 100-meter king bolt was twice that of an ordinary person, which was close to the physical limit that could be achieved through later life training. Then 3 times, or even 4 times. This has already far exceeded the physical upper limit that ordinary people can achieve through training. This must be the special and precious aspect of breath techniques, allowing practitioners to break through these limits. Rain greatly admired the tremendous strength displayed by Hamilton. A formal knight, huh? I wonder when I will be able to step into that role myself. On the way back, the Night Watchman squad leader Wayluin was exceptionally enthusiastic toward Rain. Clearly, Rain's performance in the previous battle had impressed Wayluin. Rain, when will you formally join the Night Watchman? Remember to consider joining our squad first. Wayluin said with a smile as he patted Rain on the shoulder. Of course, Captain Wayluin, I will give it serious thought, Rain replied with a slight smile. After delivering the injured to the town's administrative hall, specialized physicians came to take over. Rain, of course, went home first, planning to rest well. Upon Rain's return home, his entrance startled his entire family and Anna. This was because of the intense fight with the ferocious man-wolf, which had left Rain's body covered with bloodstains. After a thorough check, it was confirmed that Rain indeed had not been injured, which relieved his family. However, a hint of worry still shone in his mother's eyes. She hadn't realized that being a night watchman was so dangerous, involving battles with such monsters. Originally, she had been very happy that Rain could join the night watch, but now she felt conflicted. Don't worry, Emma, since Rain has chosen this path, we must believe in him. It's dangerous, but there are many opportunities, and it's certainly better than me being a mudleg for a lifetime. Old Rain comforted his wife. At that moment, Rain rubbed Bohi's head and greeted Anna. After hastily eating a few bites, he went to take a bath. Immediately afterwards, he fell into a deep sleep. He hadn't rested properly from the previous night until now, and even though Rain was full of energy, he was exhausted at this point. When Rain woke up again, it was already the next morning. Rain was just thinking about getting up when, as he started to rise, he exclaimed "ouch" and lay back down. It was then he realized that his muscles were incredibly sore all over his body, which immediately made him think of the blacksmith strength core skill he had used the day before. It must be because blacksmith strength, while granting me extraordinary power, also caused overload in my muscles after use. Rain blinked, understanding the most likely reason instantly. Fortunately, this side effect didn't erupt on the spot, but manifested itself after a period of time. If it were to erupt immediately after the performance, that would be really interesting. If the enemy still has the strength for another round, it would be like entering a weak period during battle, so the blacksmith's strength must be used with great care. Rain grimaced as he endured the soreness in his muscles and fascia, and climbed up with a grimace. However, could it be that after my constitution enhances, the severity of these after effects will decrease or even eliminate them completely? This speculation suddenly occurred to Rain. He was quite eager to try, but it's a pity that there is only one attribute point left. I have to save it. Otherwise, I could directly add the point to confirm my speculation, and at the same time, immediately relieve this muscle soreness. Rain had always treated the remaining one attribute point as his trump card to use. Unless he obtains new attribute points, he would not consider using it. After all, adding attribute points has a special effect of restoring the body's condition. This is comparable to a divine technique in battle. After getting up, Rain unintentionally discovered in the bedroom mirror that his body had bulked up significantly. He hadn't paid much attention before, but now that he took a closer look, he indeed had become much more robust. Rain looked down and touched the linen corset he was wearing, only to find the previously loose clothing was now slightly tight, subtly outlining the contours of his upper body muscles. Turning his gaze to his arms, Rain noticed that major muscle groups like the biceps and triceps had become significantly larger, bearing no resemblance to the bean sprout-like appearance when he had just crossed over to this world. After some thought, Rain took off the rather tight linen corset and rummaged through the wardrobe to find a larger-sized one. This one belonged to his father, the old Rain. After changing clothes, Rain's physique was much more concealed, and his muscular contours were hardly noticeable. Looking at himself in the mirror, Rain nodded in satisfaction. When he reached the door frame, he sized up his height and realized that although the growth wasn't obvious, he had actually grown nearly half a pinky finger taller. It was just that Rain's horizontal development was faster, which made it seem like he hadn't grown at all. When Rain arrived on the first floor, he saw through the window that in their small courtyard, Anna was accompanying Bohi and planting winter rapeseed in a small patch of land. Bohi was wearing a layered corset with a long light blue skirt resembling an apron over it. This kind of tube-shaped, waistless long skirt hung on the shoulders with straps, looked like a modern apron from the front, and made Bohi look very cute in Rain's eyes. Bohi asked, "Sister Anna, when can we harvest the winter rapeseed we planted?" Around the month of blooming flowers, I guess?" Anna looked at Bohi with a smile, her eyes full of fondness. "The month of blooming flowers? That's still 3, 4, 5. Nearly 5 months away." Bohi counted on her fingers, sounding a bit disappointed. However, Bohi soon pointed at the newly planted chives next to her and asked, "Sister Anna, what about the chives we planted before? When can we harvest them? These can be harvested sooner, probably by the month of green grass. We should be able to harvest them, Anna said as she wiped a bit of mud from Bohi's face. That's great. That means we can harvest them after winter. Bohi smiled, her eyes curving into crescent moons. Seeing the warm scene outside the window, Rain felt as if a layer of fog had been lifted from his soul. He remembered facing the ferocious werewolf the day before, whose menacing appearance, imposing stature, and bloodthirsty aura had brought a strong sense of oppression. If at that time he hadn't held on to anything in his heart, his will would not have been so steadfast. Then it's very likely that he would have dodged early on, hiding to the side without even the courage to swing his sword at the werewolf. Such a person, even if he could become stronger by continuously adding attribute points, would merely possess a strong shell. When facing real crises, hardships, and formidable enemies, he wouldn't know how much of his fighting power he could actually utilize. Suddenly, Rain, who had just come to his senses, received a system notification. Congratulations! You've experienced an epiphany, and your spirit attribute has been slightly increased. Rain was startled and immediately checked his attribute panel. Sure enough, the spirit attribute had increased from the original 9 to 11, a full 2 points, thereby once again surpassing strength to become the highest attribute. When Rain looked up, he noticed that the way he perceived the objects around him seemed different. He could faintly sense that outside his line of sight, there should be 3 birds chirping away on the oak tree by the front door, and in the corner of the kitchen wall, there seemed to be a mouse cautiously poking its head out. This wasn't an enhancement of vision, but more like a change in perception. His senses seemed to have become sharper. Rain was somewhat astonished at the moment. He hadn't expected that his reflections and conclusions about battles and life would bring him such a surprise. Perhaps this was the true reward hidden within battles. As Rain basked in joy, his stomach suddenly let out a gurgle-gurgle sound. Only then did he remember that he had come downstairs to eat something. A large piece of white bread weighing about a pound, a slice of cured meat, and an egg were the breakfast his mother had prepared for him in advance. Obviously, this was an above-standard breakfast. For the people of this world, breakfast wasn't considered a main meal, and generally, only laborers with strong physical demands would have a better breakfast. The improvement in the meals at home had occurred after Rain had handed over 2 gold coins. Knowing that her child was about to join the night watchman, his mother had immediately raised the quality of the family's 3 meals a day by 2 levels. After wolfing down the food in a few bites, Rain patted his still flat stomach and sighed. My appetite is definitely getting better. Speaking honestly, Rain was at most half full right now. One reason was due to the rapid, intense spike in his physical constitution lately. The other was that he was in his growth phase, with his body eagerly needing nutrition. Looks like I'll need to go to the pie shop later and buy a few meat pies to fill me up. At that moment, as if hearing the noise in the kitchen, Bowie ran in excitedly and said sweetly, "Brother, you're finally awake. Come and join us in planting the winter canola." Yes. Seeing Bowie's smiling face, Rain couldn't help but step forward and pat her head, saying, "Bowie, you and Sister Anna continue planting. I have something to do outside." "Okay, brother, come back soon." With that, Bowie bounced off to continue planting. Anna, standing by the door frame, shyly glanced at Rain, nodded, and said, "Then, I'll go keep Bowie company." Looking at Anna's side profile, Rain noticed that over time, Anna's complexion seemed much improved, and her light yellow hair no longer looked as dry as before, gaining a slight sheen. Rain responded to Anna with a smile and a nod, but he quickly remembered something. "Wait, Anna." Anna turned around, her large, deep brown eyes looking at Rain with confusion. "Right, Anna. Did anyone from the manor come by this morning to notify us when the servant training will resume?" Anna shook her head and said, "No one else came by this morning." "Okay, Anna, please remind me if someone from the manor comes with a notification." "Sure, okay." Anna nodded. Anna still talked to Rain with her head lowered, shy and timid. She didn't dare to look at Rain's face while speaking, and if she said a bit more, she would bow her head, a blush spreading across her pale face. This was because Rain had saved her once. In Anna's heart, Rain was a trustworthy person, otherwise she might have spoken even less. It seemed that only when with Bowie did Anna feel unrestrained, laughing naturally and relaxed. For this, Rain didn't immediately have a good solution. He just hoped time would make her more cheerful. The servant training is still on hold. It seems there's still some cleanup work to be handled in the manor, or possibly some other issue. Hamilton hasn't sent anyone to look for me either. He must be busy treating his injuries. Rain thought for a moment and decided to first go to the town's blacksmith shop in town that morning to find the blacksmith Boris and continue advancing his profession level as a blacksmith. Why not train in the giant bear breathing technique? That was because Clea had once instructed Rain that when the body is very tired or in a bad state, one must not force oneself to practice the breathing techniques. At the moment, Rain's muscles ached profoundly all over, hardly a good state, so naturally, he shouldn't force himself to practice the giant bear breathing technique. However, after leaving the house, Rain didn't head straight to the blacksmith shop. Instead, he first went to a pie shop and bought 3 pies, each the size of a 12-inch pizza from his previous life, and began to eat heartily. You should know, one 12-inch meat pie should be enough for a meal for a family of 3. But after eating 3 pies, Rain only just felt full. It looks like I need to find a way to earn more money. Otherwise, the few gold coins I have left won't be enough to let me enjoy good food. If I just eat plain white bread, the few gold coins I have could last a long time. But whether practicing the giant bear breathing technique or swordsmanship, both consume a lot of physical energy. My body craves meat. Upon the mention of eating meat, Rain couldn't help but recall the delicious taste of bear meat and involuntarily licked the corner of his mouth. If I were rich enough to eat bear meat rich in nutrients every day, I guess the progress of my giant bear breathing technique would hasten remarkably. Rain speculated. As soon as he stepped into the blacksmith shop, perhaps due to his recent advancement in the blacksmith profession, Rain suddenly felt a strange kinship with the clangs and heat that filled the blacksmith shop. Rain, you're here. I heard that last night there was an attack by jackal men at the manor, and several servants died. When blacksmith Boris saw Rain walk in, he greeted him and immediately asked, "Yes, Uncle Boris," Rain nodded, confirming Boris's words. "Such vicious events haven't occurred in years. Days are becoming less peaceful," Boris lamented. As expected, bad news travels fast. Clearly, the attack on the manor had already spread throughout Flashgold Town. The other blacksmith apprentices also started bombarding Rain with questions about the details. "Rain, I heard several servants died. I heard that Wolfman was over 2 meters tall. Yeah, how can there be such a tall Wolfman? Aren't Wolfmen usually about the same size as us?" After some idle chat, Rain began to focus and started forging horseshoes with the blacksmith, Boris. However, this time, Rain took the lead and Boris assisted in the horseshoe forging. When Rain held the blacksmith hammer, he felt as if it was an extension of his own arm. Swinging it was very natural and effective. This was probably the impact of a core blacksmith skill hammer mastery. "You forged a horseshoe," Insight enhanced. "Your skill in horseshoe forging has improved. Experience +2. You focused on forging horseshoes for half an hour. Blacksmith professional experience points +1 after advancing to a blacksmith. The experience gained from forging horseshoes had slowed down a lot. Even with Rain as the main forger, it basically took at least half an hour to gain 1 point. When someone is focused on their work, time flies by very quickly. By the time Rain realized it, it was already noon. Looking at the dozens of horseshoes stacked together, Rain still felt a great sense of accomplishment. At that moment, Rain noticed a burning gaze on him. Following the gaze, he saw Boris looking at him intensely. "Rain, have you considered coming to work for me with a salary?" No wonder Boris favored Rain. In his eyes, the amount of horseshoes that normally took at least half a day to complete were finished by Rain about 2 hours ahead of schedule. This forging efficiency truly amazed him. Of course, this was not because Rain's forging skills had surpassed those of Boris. It was due to the overall enhancement of Rain's attributes, especially the growth in spiritual power, which allowed Rain to grasp the subtle changes in the material after each hammer strike. And the increase in strength allowed Rain to swing the 7 or 8 caddies blacksmith hammer with ease, without using too much physical energy. Rain was taken aback upon hearing Boris's offer. Before coming to Boris's smithy, Rain had made sure to inquire about it. Boris's smithy had only 1 assistant, and the others were paying apprentices. Normally, a smithy in Flashgold Town like this one would need at least 2 to 3 assistants. Being an assistant meant that you already had the skills of a blacksmith, achieving a level comparable to that of a certified blacksmith in either a certain ironwork craft or a forging process. This meant you could make a living off of it. Rain looked around and noticed that the other apprentices were occasionally casting anxious glances his way, seemingly nervous about Rain accepting the offer and taking the spot they had long coveted. But obviously, Rain was not going to choose to join Boris's smithy. He came here to learn forging purely to enhance his professional level as a blacksmith, thus gaining more upgrade rewards. However, now relying solely on forging horseshoes, the speed of gaining blacksmith professional experience has become very slow. I could use this opportunity to ask Boris about the tuition for learning other forging skills. Rain thought to himself. For example, skills such as material selection, quenching, and grinding, and so on were very practical, and perhaps one of these could bring Rain a relatively larger amount of blacksmith professional experience points. As for why not learn to make weapons like a dual-handed greatsword? It wasn't that Rain didn't want it, but rather that blacksmith Boris didn't know how. Rain had long understood that blacksmith Boris was merely skilled at crafting everyday items, mainly focused on making common iron goods used in daily life, such as horseshoes, iron pots, kitchen knives, and so on, not adept at forging weapons or armor. As for the skills involved in Boris's making of the sword last time, Rain had already clearly learned about it from blacksmith apprentice Drews. That was Boris's secret skill, which he did not intend to teach any non-blood relatives. Therefore, Rain wasn't going to make things difficult for himself. Moreover, his giant bear sword technique required a dual-handed greatsword, not a sword, because only a dual-handed greatsword could fully unleash the power of the giant bear sword technique. Uncle Boris, thank you for your kindness, but I would still like to try my hand at the manners trial, Rain said tactfully. Blacksmith Boris wasn't offended by Rain's refusal. Young man, it's good to try out different things. If you can get into the manor, that would be an even better option. By the way, Uncle Boris, how much would it cost to learn skills like material selection, quenching, and grinding, etc.? I would like to have a better chance during the manor's assessment. Upon hearing Rain's words, a collective gasp could immediately be heard from those around. Clearly, the surrounding blacksmith apprentices were surprised at Rain's tall order. Not only did he not want to be a helper, but he also wanted to learn so many skills, which would be costly and not easy to master entirely. That won't be cheap. These 3 skills together will cost 5 Imperial Gold coins. However, if you come to work as a helper, I could slowly teach you these skills for free over the course of about a year. Blacksmith Boris paused for a moment, smiling amiably at Rain, while also making an offer that was very tempting to ordinary people. This made the blacksmith apprentices, who were eavesdropping on the conversation, look enviously at Rain, their expressions seeming to say, Rain is so lucky to have such a talent for smithing. Why couldn't I have been born with this talent? Facing Boris's invitation for the second time, Rain scratched his nose, smiling wryly. He hadn't expected the normally stingy blacksmith Boris to value him so highly. If it had been before, Rain would have agreed without hesitation. But now, his goal was the stars and sea. How could he possibly confine himself to a small blacksmith shop? Uncle Boris, thank you for valuing me, but let's forget about it. 5 gold coins, right? That's a lot of money. I would need to discuss it with my parents. Oh, can I study these skills separately? Rain continued after some thought. No problem. The charge for material selection is 1 gold coin, and quenching and grinding will each cost 2 Imperial Gold coins, Boris indicated with his hands. All right, Uncle Boris, I will go home and discuss it with my parents now. Of course, you can. Then, Uncle Boris, see you this afternoon. Rain, of course, did not mention this matter to his parents when he went home. Whether studying separately or seeking his parents' advice, both were merely pretexts. After eating lunch at home, Rain returned to the blacksmith shop carrying a gold coin. Upon entering, he handed a gold coin to blacksmith Boris as the tuition fee for selecting materials. After paying the fee, blacksmith Boris took Rain to a warehouse behind the forge. This was Rain's first visit here. He saw various unprocessed or stacked inside, alongside neatly arranged bars of iron, copper, and tin. Rain, let's start with selecting ores. Look at this. This is hematite, said Boris, picking up a human head-sized or intermixed with red and black colors. Generally, its surface is this dark red or black, with the fracture plane showing stripes or shell-like shapes. Rain listened attentively to blacksmith Boris's explanation while carefully weighing the heavy piece of hematite in his hands. This is cassiterite. It usually has a dull brown surface with a granular texture and a metallic luster, with cavities inside the ore. Boris explained, picking up a dark brown ore. This is chalcopyrite. With 11 points of spiritual power, Rain possessed an observation skill, discernment, and memory far exceeding that of an ordinary person. He quickly understood the several most common types of ores that Boris explained. Generally, the higher the quality of the iron ore, the more black it will appear on the surface. Seeing that Rain showed no signs of confusion, Boris continued his explanation. At that moment, Rain noticed the system prompt that appeared. You have engaged in the study of or identification, improving your understanding. You have realized a new skill or identification. Your skill or identification has improved, experience points +1. You have focused on learning or identification for half an hour, blacksmith professional experience points +1. Rain immediately saw a new icon light up below his blacksmith panel. The icon, shaped like an irregular piece of iron ore, was clearly the newly acquired skill or identification. It was then that blacksmith Boris stopped explaining and turned to Rain, saying, "Rain, these are the most common ores, but besides these, there are some extremely rare ores that are much more difficult to identify. However, the value of these ores is also extremely high." This piqued Rain's curiosity straight away. Boris then took out a piece of ore with specks like little stars from a drawer and handed it to Rain, saying, "This is star iron, also known as meteorite ore. It is said to come from falling meteors. When the meteor falls to the earth, it forms such meteorite ore, which is very rare." Rain was immediately surprised when he took the so-called star iron, because he noticed at once that this piece of star iron, or meteorite ore, weighed much more than ordinary hematite or magnetite. Despite a similar size, its weight was more than double theirs. Boris, seemingly aware of Rain's surprised expression, couldn't help but laugh. "The texture is different, right? This piece of star iron is no bigger than the size of a fist in my possession, yet its price is dozens of times higher than common iron ore." Hiss. The price really shocked Rain. Tens of times? That's way too exaggerated. Star metal possesses extreme toughness and hardness. It's an excellent material for sharp weapons such as daggers, knights' longswords, swords, or dual-handed greatswords. Of course, weapons made purely of star metal are prohibitively expensive. Even nobles are reluctant to waste so much. A more common practice is to mix it with other materials, which can enhance weapon performance while reducing costs. To identify star metal, first consider the weight. Star metal is about twice as heavy as other iron ores of the same size. Second, look at the fracture surface, where tiny metallic grains sparkle under the light, just like stars in the sky. This is also the origin of the name star metal. Well, although Boris was only a small-town blacksmith, he was quite proficient in some aspects of forging, at least in terms of identifying and working with star metal. Rain thought Boris's research was quite thorough. Suddenly, Rain sharply noticed several system prompts that were a bit different. You have learned to identify ores, enhancing your understanding. Your skill or identification has improved. Experience +17. You learn to identify the special meteorite ore. Blacksmith profession experience points +5. Hey, are there such benefits as well? This couldn't help but delight Rain. Rain realized that once he got the hang of identifying special ores, he could quickly increase his blacksmith profession experience. It seems I've mastered another quick way to improve. This made Rain look forward to Boris's next presentation on special ores. However, just as Rain was staring at Boris with eager eyes, he heard Boris say, "Let's go take a look at the metal ingots after smelting." This immediately made Rain ask, "Uncle Boris, haven't you only talked about one special ore? What about the others?" Blacksmith Boris's face turned slightly red as he said, "You rascal, think about it. How could my ordinary blacksmith shop have so many special ores? This piece of star metal is my only treasure." This instantly left Rain extremely disappointed. Just when he had seen a way to quickly increase his blacksmith profession experience, it turned out that Boris had no other special ores. Disappointment was evident on Rain's face. Cough. "Rain, if you want to learn to identify other special ores, you'll have to go to the large blacksmith shops in County Town. Of course, the blacksmith shops in the manor castles definitely also have a good stock of special ores." "Hey, Uncle Boris, I know about the blacksmith shops in the manor, but why do they have a good stock of special ores?" Rain couldn't help but ask curiously. "Haha. The equipment of the castle guards and the knights is often crafted by the blacksmith shops within the manor. So what do you think? Do they have special ores?" Boris couldn't help laughing. So that's how it is. Rain suddenly realized. Nobles, as the ruling class in this world, naturally gathered all the good things to themselves, especially such special ores that can effectively improve the equipment of their knights. The more, the better, and no one would consider it too much. In that case, the blacksmith shop within the manor is the first choice. After all, County Town is too far. and without a horse to travel, it would take a whole day to go back and forth. Perhaps after the page boy training starts, I could ask Master Ball for some guidance on identifying special ores, even if I have to offer some compensation. But relative to the rise in blacksmith professional experience points, that would be insignificant. By evening, when Rain left the blacksmith shop, his blacksmith profession level had reached Blacksmith LV1, 23 out of 100. The speed of gaining experience in or identification was slightly higher than horseshoe forging, but only marginally so. This was thanks to that special piece of ore. Otherwise, the contribution of or identification to the professional experience of a blacksmith wouldn't be as great as that from forging horseshoes. On the way home, Rain turned into a pie shop and bought a large pie that he had eaten earlier at noon. Thus, at the dinner table, Rain couldn't escape being nagged by his ever-thrifty mother. "Rain, next time you want a pie, just bring your own meat and dough for baking. That way, you can save at least 3 pennies." Rain, however, sneakily winked at little Bohi, who was happily eating, causing her to giggle nonstop. Anna also ate a small piece of pie with her head lowered, smiling without a word. Seeing this, Mother Emma took another look at her son and couldn't help shaking her head helplessly. Lately, her son was getting more and more ideas. That night, with the muscle soreness greatly alleviated, Rain returned to his room and started practicing the giant bear breathing technique for a while. However, because the black tongue oil was stored with Chief Maid Shadya, without the aid of black tongue oil, although Rain practiced hard and sweated profusely, the effectiveness of the giant bear breathing technique practice was greatly reduced. You have practiced the giant bear breathing technique, and your insight has improved. Your skill giant bear breathing technique has improved, experience +1. Giant bear breathing technique 12-2, 37 out of 300. Since his body had not fully recovered, and he couldn't overexert himself, Rain soon stopped practicing. Tomorrow is Saturday. By my calculations, I'll probably have to wait until next Monday, after Sunday, to possibly resume the page boy training, Rain thought to himself. It seems I need to make a trip back to Habsburg Manor tomorrow to get a bottle of black tongue oil from Chief Maid Shadya. The next morning, when Rain went to Habsburg Manor to find Chief Maid Shadya, he noticed that the manor's defensive preparations had noticeably improved. Soon, Rain found Chief Maid Shadya, who still wore her usual impassive, somewhat solemn expression, dressed in the black maid outfit that represented a higher-ranking servant. From her demeanor, it seemed the chief maid hadn't rested well in the past few days, looking slightly tired. Shadya, seeing Rain, showed a rare smile on her poker face, but the next second it was gone, and she asked, "Rain, you've come for the black tongue oil, haven't you?" "Yes, Chief Maid Shadya," Rain responded with a smile in return. Shadya nodded. "I thought you might be coming to see me." When the page boy training will resume is still undecided, Knight Lloyd is worried that the jackal wolves from last time might have a pack nearby. "By the way, come with me. I've stored the black tongue oil in my own room." Rain followed Shadya, entering the castle, and the two navigated the long stone corridors, turning left and right. Shortly, he followed the chief maid to a room on the first floor of the castle. As Shadya was opening the door, Rain faintly heard from the other end of the corridor a ting-ting-tang-tang noise. This sound was all too familiar to him. It was the sound of a hammer striking an anvil. "Chief Maid Shadya, is that the blacksmith shop over there?" Rain asked. Shadya paused her action of opening the door, glanced at the corridor, nodded, and said, "Yes, Rain, are you interested in the blacksmith shop?" "Haha, quite interested. By the way, is Master Ball there too?" Rain scratched his head and smiled as he continued to ask. "Yes, all the blacksmiths are here. Ball is the blacksmith in charge of forging daily supplies. Aside from Ball, the castle blacksmith shop also has blacksmith Basil, who specializes in weapon forging. Additionally, there is another person who is in charge of the blacksmith shop, Blacksmith Snell, a disciple of Master Varenton from County Town, who specializes in armor crafting." Seeing Rain's highly interested expression, Shadya elaborated a bit more on the situation in the castle's blacksmith shop. "Master's disciple specializes in armor." Rain's eyes lit up, keenly picking up on 2 keywords, and said, "Could it be that this blacksmith Snell is an armorer?" "Not yet, but he is likely to become one soon. Once he passes the Blacksmith Association's assessment at the end of the year, Snell should be promoted to armorer," Shadya said as she pushed open the door. This immediately gave Rain a feeling of unexpected relief, as if he had suddenly found a promising path. He had always wanted to find a blacksmith with high forging skills, and unexpectedly, one was right within the Habsburg estate. Furthermore, since Ball was in charge of forging daily supplies, it made sense that he was responsible for related content in the servant training. Here you go, Rain, your ironwood oil. Seeing Shadia had already taken a bottle of ironwood oil from the room and handed it to Rain. Rain took it, and before even opening the stopper, he smelled a strange yet familiar scent of ironwood oil. Thank you. Soon, this small black bottle was carefully tucked inside Rain's clothes. By the way, Chief Maid Shadia, are you familiar with Blacksmith Snell of the blacksmith shop? If it's convenient, could you introduce me? Rain asked. Rain thought that since Snell was the head of the blacksmith shop, establishing contact with him would be ideal. Hearing the name Snell, Rain sharply noticed that the chief maid's complexion seemed to blush slightly, but it quickly faded. The next second, Shadia stared at Rain quite displeased and said, Rain, one's energy is limited. I hope you can focus on practicing the night breathing method and not be distracted, lest you fail to meet the lady's expectations. Rain was at a loss for words for a moment, not knowing what to say. It was normal for Shadia to think this way. After all, practicing the night breathing method and swordsmanship would take up most of a person's time. Thus, anyone aspiring to reach the transcendent level would not waste much energy on other matters. However, what Shadia didn't know was that this situation only applied to ordinary people. But Rain was different. He had a cheat. For Rain, quickly leveling up his blacksmithing secondary profession was equivalent to quickly improving his combat profession. It would allow him to reach transcendence sooner. But this, Rain obviously couldn't explain to Shadia. Seeing the chief maid's displeased expression again, Rain knew that the idea of having Shadia help make contact was probably blown. So, Rain could only regretfully take the bottle of ironwood oil and head home. Since his body ached no more, Rain decided to wait until later to visit Boris's blacksmith shop, planning to first practice the giant bear breathing technique at home. He opened the bottle, and a strange fragrance filled the air. Rain poured a little bit of the amber-colored black poplar oil into his palm. Following Lady Clea's previous instructions, he rubbed his hands together to warm the oil before applying it to his knees and shoulders. Instantly, a burning warmth flowed from the applied areas into his skin. About half an hour later, a sweaty Rain suddenly received a system notification. Congratulations. Your constitution attribute has increased. Oh, this time it was only the constitution attribute that increased. However, this had raised Rain's constitution from 6 points to 7 points. Rain remembered that the last time he practiced the giant bear breathing technique, both constitution and strength had increased. After a moment's thought, Rain seemed to understand why. That's because my strength attribute is relatively high already, at a full 10 points, while my constitution attribute is comparatively low, at only 6 points. That's why practicing the giant bear breathing technique resulted in a particularly rapid increase in constitution. Unexpectedly, after retrieving a bottle of black poplar oil from Shadia, the chief maid, on Saturday, 3 whole days had passed and the servant training class had still not resumed. But Rain didn't mind. During those 3 days, he usually spent his days at the blacksmith shop and his nights practicing the giant bear breathing technique. His days were quite fulfilling. Now, he was past the halfway mark in his blacksmith profession level, reaching blacksmith LV1, 52 out of 100, and had made considerable progress with the giant bear breathing technique, reaching LV2, 51 out of 300. Rain was keen to practice the giant bear sword technique as well, but unfortunately, there was no suitable place near his home. Additionally, he didn't have a dual-handed greatsword, only a standard sword of the night watchman. Tuesday morning, just as Rain was planning to head to the blacksmith shop again, a locked armored guard came to his door and said, Rain, the sheriff wants to see you. If it's convenient, come with me to the town hall now. Lord Hamilton is waiting in his office for you. All right, I'll come right away. Rain didn't hesitate at all and immediately agreed. Last time Lord Hamilton had been seriously injured, and Rain also wanted to see if his wounds had healed, since he was, after all, his boss. He had gone to the town hall a couple of days ago, but the guards had told him Lord Hamilton seemed to have gone back to the county town to recuperate and had not yet returned. To see him today, there must be something urgent. Thud, thud, thud. Come in. Hearing the familiar voice, Rain opened the door and entered, seeing Lord Hamilton still in his noble hunting attire, but his complexion was still somewhat pale, and Rain seemed to smell a certain medicinal potion. He was very familiar with this smell. He often smelled it whenever he passed by the town's only Abel's potion shop. Rain, take a seat. Lord Hamilton, how has your injury recovered since last time? It was supposed to have healed today, but the ferocious werewolf's claws had some special energy. It took a lot of effort to deal with the wounds, and now I guess I'll need about another week to recover fully. Hamilton waved his hand, indicating that he didn't want to talk further about his injuries, only to continue saying, I've called you here this time because there's an urgent matter that needs your assistance. Remember the fishmen I mentioned to you before? Just yesterday, my guard came to report again that the Sinfin fishmen have extended their activity area to less than a few miles from Glimmer Lake. We need to immediately contain their expansion. Otherwise, if they start spawning in Glimmer Lake, that will be a huge problem. So, I want you to head out with a team of night watchmen today and clear out that filthy group of fish-smelling monsters. Or just chase them upstream. That's fine too. Next week, once my injuries heal, I'll personally lead a team to eradicate them all. Hamilton said with a solemn expression. Glimmer Lake is the water source for Flashgold Town, and if it were contaminated by fish people, as the sheriff, he would bear an undeniable responsibility. Upon hearing this, Rain started to think quickly. Erasing fish people wasn't something he could not consider, especially since his night watchman profession level was about to increase. Indeed, a real battle presented a great opportunity. However, he didn't know much about the group of fish people or their strength, so he decided it was best to ask first, Lord Hamilton, about the strength of these fish people. Rest assured, the intelligence reports indicate that only a small fish people tribe has moved near Glimmer Lake, and their numbers are not large. Hamilton continued, fingertips crossed beneath his chin. The majority of fish people's combat ability is generally below that of militiamen. It's just that their numbers are a bit large, and they breed rapidly, much like wild weeds that grow wildly every year, making them impossible to eradicate completely. Additionally, when they encounter an enemy they cannot defeat, they quickly dive underwater to hide. Therefore, Rain, if I were you, I would find a way to lure the fish people away from the water before striking hard. An injured Hamilton detailed his experience fighting the fish people. Okay, Lord Hamilton, but I currently don't have a suitable weapon. Could you lend me a dual-handed greatsword? Rain thought for a moment, then nodded in agreement. Since Hamilton had made it clear that the number of fish people wasn't large and their strength was not formidable, and considering he wasn't going to fight alone but with a squad of night watchmen, it was a suitable real battle opportunity. There was no reason not to agree through it. He could not only gain some valuable combat experience but also improve his night watchman profession level. Additionally, if the fish people continued to breed, it would directly impact the water safety of Flashgold Town. By defeating the fish people, he would also be protecting himself and his family. Ha ha ha, a dual-handed greatsword, you say? Of course, follow me. Hamilton laughed heartily and gave Rain a meaningful glance. That made Rain somewhat puzzled. Once Rain followed Hamilton to a small partition behind his office and saw a rack full of various short swords, long swords, swords, and dual-handed greatswords, he couldn't help but feel envious. However, there was only one dual-handed greatsword there. At that moment, Hamilton had already taken the dual-handed greatsword from the rack. Thank you, Rain said as he took it, simultaneously giving Hamilton a thoughtful look. It seemed that the sheriff had guessed that he had been practicing the giant bear sword technique, which might explain the strange look he had given him. It was probably because Hamilton had recognized it when Rain had killed a mutated hyena man last time. After all, the characteristics of the giant bear sword technique were quite distinct. Rain weighed the dual-handed greatsword Hamilton handed him, finding it was around 40 pounds, a perfect weight for his use. The blade was about 1 meter and 40 centimeters long, with a blood groove down the middle, a crossguard, and a pommel at the end of the handle with a small counterweight ball. On the ball was the emblem of the Night Watchman, a figure holding a long sword and a torch, with a bow slung over its back. From the white forging patterns of the blade, this was a rare fine steel dual-handed greatsword. You see, a fine quality fine steel knight's longsword would cost over a dozen imperial gold coins, and naturally, a dual-handed greatsword was even more expensive. Here, when we talk about fine quality, we refer to those knight's longswords that can be used for high-intensity combat, not the common iron swords that militiamen could own. Those iron swords are more than 10 times cheaper, costing only a few silver coins. and virtually every small town's blacksmith could forge one. But a good quality dual-handed greatsword. Not only is the skill required for forging one higher than that of a similar level longsword, but the quality of the steel selected for the blade is also crucial. It needs high-quality steel and an experienced blacksmith to confidently forge a fine dual-handed greatsword. It's been a long time since someone in the Night Watchman used a dual-handed greatsword like you. This dual-handed greatsword is also part of my personal collection. Rain, do you like it? Of course I like it. In fact, what Rain was thinking was more like it. A good weapon is half the life of a warrior, absolutely indispensable. Rain, if you can clean up the merfolk for me this time, then this fine steel greatsword is my gift to you. It's also a reward for your assistance last time in killing that frenzied werewolf. Lord Hamilton said heartily. Rain wanted to refuse, but he just couldn't let go of the greatsword. The greatsword was of excellent material and superb craftsmanship, and its weight was also very suitable for the level of strength Rain currently possessed. He really couldn't find a reason to refuse. Thank you for your gift, my lord. When the two sat down in the office again, Lord Hamilton suddenly remembered something, took out several documents from the office, and handed them to Rain, saying, "One is the official document for you to join the Night Watchers Army, which needs your signature. The other document records the merit event of your participation in killing the frenzied werewolf, which also needs your signature, then submission for archiving. This will serve as the basis for evaluating your merit points, and also as your qualification for future promotions." Rain took them and started reading carefully. The first document was unproblematic, just a standard form that required his signature. The second document detailed how Rain participated in killing the frenzied werewolf and the role he played. Very detailed. Additionally, the document already had Lord Hamilton's and two other Night Watcher squad leaders' signatures, likely to prevent the fabrication of deeds and for easy verification by superiors. Then, Rain readily signed his name on it. Lord Hamilton nodded with a smile and said, "Excellent, Rain. Once your documents are officially approved, you'll be a member of the Imperial Night Watchers Army. It's my honor, Lord Hamilton." By the way, Lord Hamilton, besides promotion, does this merit have any other uses? Can it be used to exchange for some training resources, like Frenzied Beast meat? Haha, of course. There are quite a few things merit points can be exchanged for. Once your merit points come through this time, you should have a good luck. However, Rain, are you planning to use the merit points from this review to exchange for beast meat? On this point, I wouldn't recommend it. Lord Hamilton first shook his head, then gave a mysterious smile. Rain was first delighted when he heard that he could exchange for ferocious beast meat similar to giant bear meat. But after hearing the latter part of Lord Hamilton's statement, he was stunned and looked at him with a puzzled face. Lord Hamilton did not beat around the bush and directly said, "Although ferocious beast meat is rare, if the amount you need is not too large, you can completely buy it with gold coins in the county town. Many monster hunters specifically do this business. Moreover, if you don't mind spending more gold coins, you can always buy fresh, high-quality ferocious beast meat at the auction house in the county town. So, regarding merit points, my advice to you is to spend them in more valuable places. For example, to use them to improve your strength with secret potions, or to choose to save up your merit points to exchange for the advanced magic potions necessary for the subsequent promotion to a formal knight. If you want to buy high-quality advanced magic potions from the auction house, not only are they outrageously expensive, but the main problem is that they are hard to come by. Your teacher must have told you this. Different night breathing techniques require the ingestion of specific advanced magic potions to successfully promote. The better the quality of the same type of potion, the better the effect of the promotion." Lord Hamilton talked at length, but Rain listened very carefully, hardly missing a word. Clea did not mention anything about how to be promoted to a formal knight before she left. Come to think of it, it made sense. After all, starting from scratch, in Clea's view, it was impossible for him to encounter the promotion stage within a year. Rain keenly caught several key points in Lord Hamilton's words, such as buying meat with gold coins, advanced magic potions, and the better the quality, the better the effect. At the same time, Rain recalled the last time Clea talked about advanced magic potions. That time, Clea had mentioned advanced magic potions once, and then avoided the topic, simply telling him to focus on building a solid foundation first. She must be worried that knowing too much might not be good for me. After all, Practicing combat skills requires full focus to achieve the best effects. However, some time will pass before the merit points are finally assessed, and regarding the exchange, I have ample time to consider this issue. Thus, Rain nodded and said, "Thank you for the advice, Lord Hamilton. I will consider it carefully." All right, you should set out as soon as possible then. Wei-Luan and the others should already be waiting for you at the door. Yes, my lord. Although Rain was a bit surprised to be departing immediately, he had a premonition that Lord Hamilton had sought him out for a reason, so it wasn't completely out of the blue. When Rain reached the administrative hall's entrance, he realized that the elite night watchmen accompanying him each had a nag. Although the nags did not compare to the impressive steeds in the manor stables, they were still adequate for traveling. Night Watchman Captain Wei-Luan had also prepared a nag for Rain. "Rain, we are now going to ride to Glimmer Lake, which will take about 2 hours to reach our destination, spend a few more hours to complete the mission, and we should be able to return to Flash Gold Town before nightfall. As for other matters, we can discuss them on the way." Wei-Luan briefly explained the arrangements. Rain immediately nodded his head. No wonder Wei-Luan and the others had prepared nags. The distance from Flash Gold Town to Glimmer Lake was a bit further than to the county town, and walking there would probably take half a day. In that case, they might not be able to complete the mission before darkness fell. The forest at night was a place even knights preferred to avoid. For the night watchman, surely the best choice was to complete the mission quickly and then return to Flash Gold Town to rest. All right, Captain Wei-Luan, let's set out then. Before leaving, Rain also had someone send a message back home. However, it was awkward because Rain had never learned to ride horses, so after mounting, he was wobbly and unsteady. It took a long time for him to adapt before it got marginally better. Haha, Rain, once you join the Night Watchman, horseback riding is an essential skill. You need to learn it promptly, Wei-Luan said with a laugh, patting Rain on the shoulder. On the southern side of Flash Gold Town, John Moyle of John's Ranch not only sells horses, but also specifically teaches riding. The tuition seems to be 2 gold coins. Rain, you should find some free time to learn. Having a horse will make completing many long-distance tasks much easier. John's Ranch, huh? Rain pondered. At the same time, he recalled when he had just learned the giant bear breathing technique. The requirements for his job change to night attendant included mastering horsemanship. But Rain wasn't sure if he could still change his job to night attendant now that he had already changed from a militiaman to a night watchman. After a brief thought, Rain decided he still needed to find time to go to John's Ranch to learn horsemanship. After all, a man with many skills is never oppressed. 2 hours later, Rain, carrying a dual-handed greatsword, stood with a group of night watchmen on gazing at the nearby Glimmer Lake, shimmering in the distance. The morning mist had not yet completely dispersed. The sunlight shone on the lake's surface, casting a thin golden glow, surrounded by dark green forests. Such a beautiful painting dazzled Rain. Rain murmured to himself, "This should be called Golden Light Lake. Why is it called Glimmer Lake?" Beautiful, isn't it? Wei-Luan, noting Rain's enchanted demeanor, couldn't help but ask with a smile. "More than beautiful," Rain confidently said. "Then you probably haven't been here at night during summer. As for why it's called Glimmer Lake, it's because during summer nights, there are swathes of fireflies dancing on the lake's surface, and that's when Glimmer Lake is at its most beautiful," Wei-Luan explained. "Summer nights, huh? I'll definitely have to come and see it next time." Rain couldn't help but feel a hint of longing. "Hey, is that a merman?" While admiring the beautiful view, Rain sharply noticed something, immediately pointed towards the furthest end of Glimmer Lake, and said. Wei-Luan and other elite night watchmen immediately looked in the direction Rain was pointing. In the gradually dispersing mist, they could see several creatures about 1.5 meters tall, with fish heads on human bodies, wandering around the lake shore. It seemed as if they had happily discovered a new habitat, or perhaps they were merely searching for food. They really are mermen. Didn't we say that we still need to walk upstream along Glimmer Lake for a while? These mermen have spread to the Glimmer Lake area so quickly? Lucky we came in time. Upon seeing the scene before them, the night watchman of Wei-Luan's squad couldn't help but burst into animated discussion. Although, this mission required either driving away or killing the group of mermen. But Rain knew that the first choice was, of course, to kill them. That way, they wouldn't have to trouble Lord Hamilton to come back after his recovery. "Captain Wei-Luan, how shall we eliminate these mermen?" Although Rain ranked first in combat ability, The other night watchmen were more experienced in other areas, especially Captain Wayluin, who was not someone a novice like Rain could compare with. So, Rain didn't intend to offer any suggestions on tactical arrangements. To this, Wayluin clearly had a plan already and smiled. These few can just be shot down with bows and arrows. When we find the merman camp, I plan to have Mateo here to lure the mermen. Rain turned his head to look, seeing the night watchman named Mateo, who was only slightly taller than Rain and shorter than most night watchmen. He looked quite slender, but his whole demeanor was spirited, with a clever gleam in his eyes. Rain faintly understood Wayluin's plan. Murlocs bully the weak and fear the strong, refraining from attacking robust humans if only a few of them are present. But upon seeing frail women and children, they immediately howl and, brandishing their weapons, commence the hunt. Therefore, Wayluin intended to use the lean Mateo as bait to lure out the Murlocs from their tribe and then encircle and kill them. Rain nodded, a very prudent scheme, allowing for an immediate retreat should any contingency arise. Wouldn't it work to just attack the Murloc tribe directly? It's not that it wouldn't work, but that it would be pointless. When Murlocs encounter insurmountable enemies or danger, they will immediately dive into nearby waters, either to gather more Murlocs for a counterattack or hide in the water until the formidable enemies leave. Therefore, if they can't annihilate a large number of Murlocs in one go, considering their extremely high reproductive rate, the waters will soon be teeming with Murlocs again. Let's go. Let's take out these few Murlocs first. Wayluin was pleased with Rain's amiable attitude, turned to speak with the other night watchman, and began to stealthily approach the Murlocs. However, after only a few steps, Wayluin turned his head to Rain and said, "You know, Rain, you can rest for a while. We can handle these Murlocs with just our bows and arrows." After saying this, Wayluin also took down the bow and arrows from his back and gestured. This made Rain pause. He glanced at the other night watchman and instantly understood, scratching his head and smiling, "All right, Captain Wayluin, then I'll support you from the rear." He had come with only the dual-handed greatsword wrapped in sheepskin, having brought no bow and arrows at all. It wasn't really about Rain being lazy, but because, with his LV2 basic archery, it was a bit embarrassing to show off. Wayluin was aware of this too, hence he didn't remind Rain before they set off. Of course, the main reason was that Rain wouldn't consider wasting precious skill points on basic archery skills in the short term. Thus, Rain was left alone at the back, watching 10 elite night watchmen slowly advance in a semi-encirclement formation. Once they reached shooting distance, they notched their bows and took aim. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. After a flurry of arrows whistled through the air, the 4 Murlocs fell to the ground. Rain's eyes brightened. He finally realized why Lord Hamilton had sent the night watchmen instead of the peace officers and guards from Flash Gold Town. Because of archery. The archery skills of the night watchmen were generally a notch above those of the others. They were indeed perfectly suited for battling the Murlocs. Rain stepped forward and began to carefully examine these humanoid creatures that Captain Wayluin considered not very intelligent. These Murlocs were about 1.5 meters in length, covered with fine and slippery scales, seemingly having decent defensive power. They had bulbous eyes protruding from their fish heads and large mouths filled with sharp teeth, from which a foul stench emanated. Both hands and feet had webs, and they held a variety of poor-quality weapons, primarily shoddy fish spears, great swords, and short spears, none wielded short bows, and their equipment was quite crude. Rain even went so far as to poke the other side with the hilt of a sword. Sure enough, the layer of scales on the Murloc's surface had protection akin to a single layer of leather armor. Of course, if he were to strike with the fine steel greatsword in his hand, the difference with or without that layer of scales would be non-existent. Rain, this is the distinctive mark of the Sinfin Murlocs. Look. Captain Wayluin flipped over one of the dead Murlocs, revealing a long dorsal fin that ran down the center of the Murloc's back. The fin, peppered with occasional sharp spines, was a dark gray color. Different features among Murlocs represent different tribes, and sometimes the disparity in strength can be significant. For instance, on the coastline near Fishing Port Town, the Blackgill fish people live, and their strength surpasses that of the Eviltail fish people by not just a little. Moreover, even within the same species of fish people, the strength of each tribe varies greatly. Rain listened intently at the side, nodding from time to time. He could tell that Captain Wayluin was passing on his experience to him. Let's go. Following the fish people's tracks should lead us quickly to their encampment. Alongside a small river upstream from Glimmer Lake, Rain and his group followed the webbed footprints left by the fish people on the bank, searching upstream. Soon, they found the tracks growing more concentrated. Before them on the riverbank, they saw over a dozen newly built stilt houses made of branches and thatch, and the camp was bustling with the shadowy figures of many short individuals. Clearly, this was the headquarters of the Evil-Tail Fish People. Looking at the small Evil-Tail Fish People tribe of no less than 100 before him, Wayluin couldn't help but frown and said, "This group of Evil-Tail Fish People has relocated their entire tribe here. There are plenty more than expected. I fear we will have a tough time dealing with them. This is quite different from what the reconnaissance report indicated." "Captain Wayluin, what did the reconnaissance report say? That their numbers weren't this many?" Rain asked curiously. Wayluin shook his head and said, "The report mentioned small bands of Evil-Tail Fish People being spotted upstream of Glimmer Lake, typically in groups of 30 to 50. But this group, there are far too many, at least 100 by estimation. Let's abandon this for now, and wait for Lord Hamilton to recover from his injuries. It would be most prudent for him to take action," Wayluin suggested with a thoughtful frown. Rain glanced at the display on his panel showing the Night Watchman Profession Level LV1, 87 out of 100, and the Giant Bear Sword Technique LV2, 269 out of 300. Both were about to level up, and withdrawing now didn't sit well with Rain at all. Thus, Rain inquired again, "Captain Wayluin, although their numbers are a bit high, the individual strength of the fish people isn't strong. Would it be so difficult to kill them? That's the thing. It's not about just eliminating some of the fish people, but trying to annihilate them as completely as possible. With so many of them, even if we took them down one arrow at a time, it would take quite a long while," Wayluin said with a furrowed brow. "According to the original plan, you were to cut off their escape route, which I fear would put tremendous pressure on you, Rain." He was worried Rain couldn't withstand it. Hearing Wayluin explain it this way, Rain's brow smoothed out. Rain saw things differently. Firstly, this group of Evil-Tail Fish People didn't possess ranged weapons like bows and arrows, and his own practice of the Giant Bear Sword technique was particularly well suited for handling such melee fights. Furthermore, his strength had improved since the battle with the Jackal Men. The increase of 2 spirit points allowed Rain to grasp more details in combat, making it less likely for him to get injured. So Rain said with a smile, "Captain Wayluin, I have confidence in myself. Let's give it a try. There shouldn't be a problem." Upon hearing Rain volunteer so readily, Wayluin was momentarily stunned. But looking into Rain's serious eyes, he realized this was no joke. Moreover, as the person who would be facing the most pressure in the battle, if Rain was prepared to give it a try and he insisted on retreating, it would be quite demoralizing. So, after pondering for a moment, Wayluin slapped Rain's shoulder firmly and said in a deep voice, "All right. Since you're confident, Rain, let's give it our all. But remember, if we can't hold them off, retreat immediately. Come on, let's set up a trap here, just in case we need to pull back." "Right, boss." The Night Watchman Elite got to work immediately at Wayluin's signal. In no time at all, they had set up several spike traps and trip ropes and carefully marked each one to prevent their own from accidentally triggering them. After everything was ready, Mateo advanced alone, disguising himself as a human hunter who mistakenly wandered near the Murloc camp. As Mateo shot and retreated, successfully killing 3 spear-wielding Murloc warriors, the entire Murloc camp erupted like a disturbed hornet's nest. Following a noisy clamor in Murloc language, suddenly, 20 or 30 Murloc warriors armed with various spears, knives, and clubs surged out, charging at Mateo with overwhelming momentum. Murlocs are typically bullies that fear the strong and oppress the weak. Seeing only one human opponent, how could they resist charging at him? Mateo immediately pretended to be overpowered and hurried back to the ambush circle that had been set up in advance. Soon, this large group of Murloc warriors passed through a narrow mountain valley and directly rushed into the Night Watchman's encirclement. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The other prepared Night Watchman elites, from a higher position, drew their bows and shot arrows at the densely packed Murloc warriors with the fastest shooting speed. As expected, these Murloc warriors, with their bubble eyes, upon seeing nearly 10 human archers suddenly appear, instantly got scared and started to flee. Although they were fleeing in terror now, once they returned to their camp, they would quickly bring more Murloc warriors back for revenge. To prevent this, Wayluin and Rain had already discussed using the strategy of gradually defeating the Murlocs step by step, never allowing this group of Murloc warriors to return. Suddenly, a figure swiftly attacked from behind, blocking the entrance of the valley with just one person. A long dual-handed greatsword, like a silver blade, kept flipping up and down. With each beautiful arc it made, it brought up a storm of blood and gore as Murloc limbs, weapon fragments, or light blue blood were splattered into the air. In Murloc language, Warlu, the Murloc warriors, caught between attacks from both sides, instantly panicked, scrambling around like headless flies. However, they helplessly found that with dense arrow rain in front and brutal greatsword behind, after several futile and fruitless counterattacks, only a few Murlocs remained trembling within the encirclement. With a few twangs of bows, these last few were also eradicated. Looking at a large pile of Murloc bodies, Wayluin stepped forward and patted Rain, who was heavily panting, and said, "Well done, Rain. I finally understand why Lord Hamilton values you so much. It seems your strength has improved since last time." Wayluin and the other elite Night Watchmen discovered, to their astonishment, that Rain had managed to emerge from the intense battle completely unscathed. This was due to his superhuman 11 points of spiritual power and his danger perception ability that allowed Rain to avoid many attacks that would have otherwise hit him. The sharpness of the danger perception ability correlates directly with Rain's spirit. The stronger the spiritual power, the more acute the perception. Captain Wayluin, you flatter me. It was good teamwork. Look, most of the Murlocs actually died from the arrows, Rain said with a smile, pointing at the Murloc bodies. Wayluin's smile grew even broader at Rain's modesty. Who wouldn't like a subordinate who not only has the strength but also knows how to speak well? You guys rest for a while, then clean up the next wave. I'll keep watch. Wayluin signaled for the others to take a brief rest. Alright. Rain took this opportunity to focus his attention on the panel. The system had just prompted the following. Your skill Giant Bear Sword technique has been upgraded. Experience points plus 132. You have undergone a battle. Gaining Night Watchman Professional Experience points plus 67. Night Watchman Profession level successfully advanced to the next level. Currently Night Watchman LV2, 54 out of 300. Name, Rain Carlin. Profession, Blacksmith LV1, 52 out of 100. Out of Night Watchman LV2, 54 out of 300. Constitution, 7 Strength, 10 Agility, 9 Spirit, 11 remaining attribute points. 2 remaining skill points. 1 additionally, the Giant Bear Sword technique had reached LV3, 101 out of 500. Having just battled the Fishmen, the technique Rain used the most was the Giant Bear Sword technique's crowd control move Whirlwind Slash. Therefore, after the upgrade of the Giant Bear Sword technique, the fragments of swordsmanship training brought to Rain's mind primarily consisted of memories related to Whirlwind Slash. These training memories were quickly assimilated by Rain and swiftly embedded into his muscle memory. Thus, when Rain grasped the fine steel greatsword again, it seemed to feel a bit different. The greatsword in his hands felt even more familiar, and he was more proficient in handling it. About the skill points, after pondering briefly, Rain added that 1 point directly into the core skill Blacksmith Strength. Given that level 2 of Blacksmith Strength had again demonstrated tremendous support, during roughly 40 seconds of burst duration, Rain nearly single-handedly held off and defeated a large crowd of Fishman warriors. As soon as that 1 skill point was invested, the icon resembling Popeye flexing his biceps suddenly lit up around the edges. The line of text beneath the icon also changed, displaying Curse Skill, Blacksmith Strength LV3, active. Blacksmith Strength LV3, active. Effect. When this skill is activated, your strength will increase substantially. Note, the effect of this skill is based on a proportionate increase to the host's own strength, and its duration is proportional to the host's constitution and spiritual power. Rain scrutinized it carefully, noting that besides the increase from LV2 to LV3, the description of Blacksmith Strength had changed the word slightly to substantially. Clearly, LV3 of Blacksmith Strength would further increase the amplification of his strength. Although he did not know the exact proportion, it was definitely stronger than the previous roughly 40%, and judging by the past increase, it could likely be 60%. Shoot, if the increase really is 60%, that would be 10 plus 6, a total of 16 points of strength. He wouldn't be far behind a full-fledged knight now. A thought suddenly flashed through Rain's mind. Could it be that I am on the path of great strength brings miracles? After adding the skill point, looking at the panel which now showed 2 remaining attribute points, Rain thought briefly and quickly added 1 point to his constitution, while keeping the last point in reserve as a backup. Rain clearly remembered. The duration this time was nearly 10 seconds longer than the previous battle with the ferocious werewolves, which was likely due to the increase in his constitution. As the effects of Blacksmith's strength became stronger, Rain naturally wanted to enhance its endurance. After all, being strong but not durable just wouldn't do. A man has to be durable. And the special effect of full stamina recovery that came with adding points instantly invigorated the otherwise somewhat weary Rain. Immediately, Rain, holding the hilt of the great sword, felt eager to test it out. However, before Rain could say anything, the fishmen in the camp opposite seemed to become restless as well. After all, the fishmen were not fools. Seeing that none of the previous batch of fishmen warriors had returned, they knew something might have gone wrong. At that moment, everyone saw a fishman warrior, who was notably taller than the other fishmen and wielding a gleaming trident, step out of the fishman camp, with what seemed like all the remaining fishman warriors rallying behind him. The opposing fishman swung his trident, and a massive throng of fishman warriors surged in their direction. Aside from Rain and Mateo, everyone, return to your original positions. Wayluin waved grandly, and the elite night watchmen immediately ceased their rest, each with bow drawn and arrows ready, continuing to hide in the surrounding grass encircling the area. It was still the short-statured Mateo who went forward to lure the enemy, while Rain hid alone on the outer side of the valley, not far from the narrow passage. Swoosh, swoosh. As Mateo ran and shot, the group of fishmen warriors, as expected, brandished their weapons and charged toward the encirclement while yelling chaotically. Just when everyone thought that the enemy would barge into the encirclement as before, the tall spearsman suddenly roared loudly, and these fishmen warriors actually began to slow down, barely stopping at the mouth of the valley. This immediately caused Wayluin's expression to drastically change as he thought to himself, this is not good. Because the night watchmen were far fewer in number than the fishmen, if they were forced to fight, even if they could defeat the fishmen, nearly half would escape, not achieving the desired outcome. Moreover, in a head-on battle, the night watchmen would inevitably suffer significant casualties. This was something Captain Wayluin did not want to see. The tall spearsman then stepped forward from the rear of the fishmen warriors, looking at the valley littered with fishmen corpses, and couldn't help but roar again in anger. Mateo was even more anxious. He not only stopped retreating, but also advanced toward the narrow passage, fiercely shooting several arrows at the clustered fishmen warriors. But except for the first arrow that killed one fishman warrior, the other two arrows were deflected by the tall spearsman with his gleaming spear. Mateo wanted to continue shooting, but he found out that he had already used up the dozens of arrows in his quiver. At this, Mateo was flustered. The man was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. Rain, lying in ambush outside the valley, also sensed that something was wrong. Through the grass, his eyes could clearly see 20 or 30 fishmen gathered at the pass, refusing to enter the encirclement in the valley. This seriously contradicted Captain Wayluin's plan to lure the enemy. Rain could even faintly hear Mateo's cursing and mocking voice in the valley. Has the fishmen learned their lesson? Do they know it's a trap inside? Probably. After all, there are fishmen corpses everywhere inside, and the people hadn't had time to deal with them before the second wave of fishmen arrived. Given this, Rain had a bold idea. If you don't want to enter, then I'll force you in. The next second, Rain shook his dual-handed greatsword, and the soft sheepskin covering it was instantly flung aside. With a forceful tap of his toes, the ground beneath him sunk, and like a tiger descending the mountain, he charged directly into the rear of the fishmen warriors. At this time, Captain Wayluin, lying in ambush in the valley grass, had large beads of sweat forming on his forehead. What should we do? Charge out directly? No, that would definitely lead to a melee. We are too few in number. Even a victory would be a Pyrrhic victory. But if we don't charge out, once they block the pass, we'll be even more passive. Regardless, we have to charge. Just as Wayluin was about to rise, he suddenly discerned a disturbance at the mouth of the pass among the fishmen. He immediately focused his attention and saw a bright silver light suddenly appearing behind the fishmen, darting left and right, seemingly driving the fishmen warriors into the pass. Is that Rain? Wayluin couldn't help but blurt out as a flash of realization crossed his mind. That glow was indeed Rain, who had activated Blacksmith's power LV3, and supported by a strength of 10 plus 6, Rain was like an unleashed wild horse, rampaging through the group of fishmen warriors. More terrifying was the fine steel greatsword in Rain's hands, which, propelled by a strength of 16, swung about like a high-speed sewing machine. With a flash of light, severed limbs and body parts danced in midair. Merfolk language, blah blah blah. The towering spearfish warrior had, of course, also noticed Rain wreaking havoc behind him. He immediately roared and, brandishing his spear, charged rapidly towards Rain. Bring it on. Upon seeing the towering spearfish warrior charging at him, Rain felt no fear. Instead, a strong impulse to test his might surged within him. Leap slash. Rain pushed off the ground with his feet, causing the dirt to explode, and he rapidly soared into the air, slashing downward with a fierce leap slash at the incoming spearfish warrior. After this strike, Rain felt an exhilarating rush throughout his body. The tall fishman warrior, who had raised his steel fork in a desperate attempt to block, froze on the spot. By then, his steel fork was already split into two by Rain's sword, and more fatally, a bloodline had appeared on his forehead, slicing through his chest and abdomen down to his lower body. Sizzle! The next second, pale blue blood burst out from the bloodline like a fan-shaped fountain. The towering fishman warrior instantly split into two halves, his eyes bulging and his mouth opening and closing as if he wanted to say something. Seeing their leader fail to withstand even a single strike sent the remaining fishman warriors into a terrified disarray. A group of surviving fishman warriors, their desire to fight completely obliterated, involuntarily hid in the narrow pass. Although they knew it might be dangerous inside, staying outside meant certain death. Between a possible death and an inevitable death, no one would foolishly choose the inevitable. It was the same for the fishmen. Yes, Rain did an amazing job. At this moment, the elite night watchmen hidden in the bushes had all excitedly stood up, completely ignoring the less than 10 defeated soldiers who rushed into their trap. The fight Rain had fought in less than half a minute had them boiling with excitement. The subsequent battle was without suspense.
Always happy for the new
After
hairstyles.
several volleys of arrows, the valley was almost entirely filled with the disgusting smell of rotting fishman corpses. Haha, good job, Rain. Wayluin strode over to Rain and gave him a hearty hug while he was still savoring that sword strike. After Rain's rapturous leap slash, the fishman warriors dared not face him anymore, desperately squeezing towards the pass and rushing towards the valley. Thus, Rain stopped and carefully relished that leap slash. This was the best leap slash Rain felt he had executed since he started learning the giant bear sword technique. The system notification confirmed this. Your skilled giant bear sword technique has improved. Experience plus 248. You have survived the battle. Night Watchman professional experience points plus 83. The progress bar of the giant bear sword technique surged significantly, jumping from LV3 101 out of 500 to LV3 349 out of 500, passing the halfway mark. Moreover, the Night Watchman's profession level also showed a significant increase, reaching LV2 137 out of 300. The gains were indeed substantial. The successive annihilation of two groups of fishmen warriors meant that the backbone of this small evil fin fishmen tribe had been broken. After a brief rest, Captain Wayluin started directing the final battle. However, this time, no matter how Mateo lured them, the remaining evil fin fishmen would not leave their camp to pursue him. Instead, they seemed to harbor a faint fear of Mateo, who was alone. What should we do? Just charge in. The remaining fishmen seemed to be all weak and sick. We can't just charge in. We need to move in from the riverbank and encircle the fishmen camp. All right, then let's move quickly and drive them into the forest from the shallows. Yes, and then kill them one by one. Rain's recent battle had completely buoyed the morale of the Night Watchmen. Everybody was chipping in with suggestions, and in the midst of their many voices, the rough plan was completed, with Captain Wayluin barely getting a word in. However, Wayluin didn't mind at all, but instead nodded with a smile again and again. It had been a long time since he had seen his squad this spirited. As the captain, Wayluin found it hard to believe that all this was triggered by a young man whose lips were still downy with youth. To have such strength at such a young age was no small feat. After the plan was set, the elite members of the Night's Watch quickly began to act under Wayluin's command. Rain took the lead, his dual-handed greatsword swinging with a continual whooshing sound, as they rapidly advanced along the riverbank, cutting straight through. It was like a sharp knife slicing along the riverbank, separating the fishmen camp from the street. And right behind Rain were 10 Night Watchmen wielding bows and arrows. They followed behind Rain, continuously drawing bows and shooting arrows, driving the fishmen deep into the forest. Most of the fishmen remaining in the camp were old, weak, or sick. From the moment Rain and the others appeared, the whole camp fell into chaos. Few had the courage to resist, and most were frantically running without choosing their paths. Any slight hesitation could result in the fishman's death under the sharp arrows of the Night Watchman. Thus, this fight encountered hardly any resistance and was akin to a swift breeze sweeping away the leaves, utterly defeating the remaining fishmen. After the panic, the fishmen that fled into the forest realized that it was a dead end as well. Not to mention anything else, just the fierce beast lurking in the Nightingale Forest would consider them as food and devour them completely. So these scattered fishmen could only choose to run back toward the stream from the forest, where they were once again faced with a barrage of arrows. The elite Night Watchmen killed these returning fishmen one by one. In the end, the fishmen who truly managed to escape into the river were few and far between. By this point, the small evil fin fishmen tribe was completely dead. Even if a handful of fishmen managed to flee, they were no longer a concern. Without a tribe and settlement to rely on, the remaining isolated fishmen were likely to become prey to other beasts soon. In the dense and overgrown Nightingale Forest, the roles of hunter and prey could switch far faster than one might imagine. Your skill, giant bear sword technique, has improved. Experience plus 49, you have gone through a battle. Night Watchman professional experience points plus 15, since the intensity of this battle was very low. Almost like sweeping away fallen leaves with an autumn breeze, the experience Rain gained was also much less. Of course, this was all expected. While Rain was checking the system messages, the Night Watchmen were not resting, but were quickly starting to loot the battlefield for spoils, heads bowed. Although the weapons of these fishmen were crudely made, sometimes one could find quite a few good items among them. Once, someone had killed a fishman and discovered that it was actually carrying a piece of mithril or the size of a fist. That person made a fortune on the spot. So, after the fishmen had been completely eliminated, the Night Watchmen began to search for battle loot. Rain, don't just stand there, come help me. Captain Whalowin called out to Rain with a smile and a wave. Truth be told, it wasn't that Rain looked down on the fishmen's poor weapons and equipment. Rather, Rain believed that, as this was his first time participating in a Night Watchman squad's battle, it was more beneficial for him to show restraint concerning the loot to integrate better into the team's collective. Seeing Rain's expression, Whalowin immediately guessed something and laughed heartily. Haha, Rain, do you think the battle loot each person picks up belongs solely to themselves? That would be total chaos. Rain's brow furrowed. Could there be some etiquette involved? Captain Whalowin, isn't it that way? Of course not. The distribution of battle loot is carried out according to regulations. Otherwise, those who get injured and can't pick up any loot would be at a huge loss, Whalowin explained. Fairly distributing battle loot is a tradition of the Night Watchman, which, after long practice, has gradually been improved upon and formed into specific rules. Whalowin briefly explained to Rain the loot distribution rules of the Night Watchman. Rain nodded continuously as he listened. He hadn't expected that there were actually intricacies involved just in the distribution of battle loot. For instance, in the loot distribution rules of the Night Watchman, 30% was handed over to the Empire, and the remaining 70% was allocated to individuals. Within this remaining 70%, there were detailed rules regarding rewards for those who performed exceptionally in battle, the proportion of loot distribution based on different combat roles, the pricing of enemy weapons and equipment after the battle, and even how much compensation one should receive for having an arm severed on the battlefield. However, no matter how one calculated it, Rain had been incredibly instrumental in this battle and could almost directly claim half of the total amount of the 70% of the battle loot. After much searching, nearly half of the loot found by everyone turned out to be his. This suddenly made Rain, who had come to the realization, feel a bit embarrassed, so he quickened his pace and began searching the fisherman camp. The corpses in the valley had been thoroughly searched earlier, and now it was mainly the fisherman camp area. Rain stepped into one of the stilt houses and found it contained only numerous clay pots and dried fish, the entire house reeking of a strong fishy smell. This made him involuntarily furrow his eyebrows. Perhaps this fishy smell was a rare delicacy for the fishmen, but for humans, it was somewhat unbearable. Rain casually rummaged around, and could say he found nothing of value. So, he quickly left and moved on to the next stilt house. This stilt house seems quite a bit larger. Rain noticed the difference as soon as he entered. Since the stilt houses all had a conical appearance, the larger size wasn't easy to distinguish from the outside, but one could tell the difference once inside. This stilt house had a lot more furnishings, and in one corner, there was even a worn wooden box. Rain's eyes lit up immediately. and he used his greatsword to pry open the box, revealing a glint of shine within. There were a small amount of gold and silver coins, a piece of green agate, 3 or 4 pieces of magnetite, and a nugget of gold. Rain picked up the supposed gold nugget with delight, but as soon as he held it, he felt that the weight was off. It was clearly too light. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be just a high-quality piece of brass ore. Rain was greatly disappointed at this discovery, since the wooden box was beginning to rot and was too heavy to carry conveniently. Rain took the coins one by one and placed them in his pocket and packed the green agate and others into a large cloth bag. Huh, what's this? Suddenly, Rain discovered that in the half-empty wooden box, beneath several larger pieces of magnetite, there was a fist-sized, slightly luminescent mysterious ore. This peculiar glow immediately caught Rain's attention. Rain promptly picked up the ore, and as soon as he held it, he felt an unusually heavy sensation. Hiss. Such a high density, it might even be heavier than star iron. Having learned how to identify ores from the blacksmith Boris last time, Rain was no longer ignorant about ores. Rain first squeezed it forcefully, then he lightly hacked at it a few times with his greatsword. The bizarre ore remained undamaged, which further strengthened Rain's judgment. Simply based on its hardness and weight, this piece of ore must be some kind of special ore. Moreover, according to Rain's initial judgment, the value of this piece of ore likely was not less than that of the piece of star iron that Boris owned. Thinking it over, Rain had no inclination to selfishly keep the ore for himself. Even if this ore was extremely valuable, he would probably receive it during the distribution of spoils based on his contribution, provided he didn't want anything else. Consequently, Rain dumped everything from the wooden box into a large cloth bag. He then picked up the heavy bag and found his team leader, Wailuin. So much? After seeing what was inside the cloth bag, Wailuin immediately widened his eyes, a surprised expression facing Rain. Rain, you really are our squad's lucky star. Watching Rain, who had gathered a lot in such a short time, Wailuin didn't know what to say all of a sudden and could only shake his head and sigh at Rain's good luck. Captain Wailuin, when the valuation is done and we distribute the spoils, I'll take this ore, Rain said as he took out the softly glowing stone from the bag and handed it to Wailuin. Seems like a special ore? That's indeed rare. No problem. While Wailuin was experienced and knowledgeable, his ability to identify ores was no better than Rain's. He just knew that this wasn't an ordinary ore. Go on then, Wailuin said as he directly tossed the ore back to Rain. Just as Rain was puzzled, he heard Wailuin say, "You taking it now is the safest way. Waiting until we bring the spoils back to town for the quartermaster to value it very well might get assessed into the Empire's required 30% share. Just take it now, and if it's valuable, remember to buy each of us a round of tequila," Wailuin said, patting Rain's shoulder with a laugh. Clearly, in Wailuin's heart, winning over Rain, the promising star of the Night Watchman squad, was much more important than this special ore. Haha, of course, no problem, but this. Rain certainly understood Captain Wailuin's kindness. He just wasn't sure if this distribution was really okay, so he didn't know what to say next. Just then, a Night Watchman team member waved at Wailuin, who was talking with Rain, and called out, "Captain, you better come take a look at this." From the tone, it seemed there was some unexpected discovery. Curious, Rain followed Wailuin over. They saw a very noticeable trail of huge footprints stretching into the depths of the forest. As this area was near a small river and the ground was moist, the footprints were exceptionally clear. Hiss. They're so big. Rain exclaimed in surprise as he looked at the row of footprints before him. For toes. These are ogre tracks. Unlike Rain's surprise, Wailuin's expression changed dramatically. Rain, we need to leave here immediately. To think that ogres appeared here, and it looks like this small tribe of Sinfin fishmen must have been driven here by the ogre. Perhaps the ogres are keeping these fishmen as livestock. If that's really the case, and we've killed so many fishmen, this is bad. We need to leave immediately. Everyone, move. Stop collecting the spoils. Wailuin immediately called out to everyone. Seeing Wailuin look so anxious, Rain felt a tightening in his heart as well. After all, as the captain of the Night Watchman, Wailuin was far more experienced than him, and the enemy had just witnessed his combat power. The fact that they were now hastily deciding to retreat indicated that the ogre's strength must far surpass their own. Soon, everyone put the spoils on the pack horses, and then each leaped onto their horses, heading back the way they had come. Actually, Rain was still somewhat puzzled. Since we really discovered traces of the ogre, shouldn't we stealthily approach and investigate? Or is it that ogres have extremely acute senses of smell or hearing, making it impossible to approach? After all, we don't even know the number of ogres. After hastily leaving the Glimmer Lake region, Rain could no longer hold back and asked, Captain Waylowin, are ogres really that fearsome? Waylowin glanced at Rain and said gravely, more terrifying than you can imagine. You've also fought the savage werewolves before. Were they not very strong? Of course. Rain nodded. That savage werewolf was the strongest enemy he had encountered so far. Well, do you know what would happen if that savage werewolf encountered a mature ogre? It would either obediently become the ogre's subordinate, or it would run away immediately. There's no third option. The gap between them is like that between wolves and brown bears in the forest. Waylowin gestured with his fingers and confidently stated, that large? Rain expressed surprise. This was far beyond his expectations. Ogres were so powerful. He had thought their strength would be fairly similar. Waylowin nodded and continued, yes, Rain, have you heard about the recent ogre attack on Alborough Town? This. I think I've heard something about it. Rain immediately recalled the content discussed by some pseudo-rich generation peers on the day he just crossed over, which seemed to be about this Alborough Town. The sheriff of Alborough Town, Knight Hamza II, whose strength is not much inferior to Lord Hamilton, was severely wounded by that roaming ogre that night. If it weren't for other night watchmen risking their lives to distract the ogre, Sir Hamza, a knight of great strength, might have been killed in honor. After hearing Waylowin's explanation, Rain raised an eyebrow. This really surprised him. He had always thought ogres were just large, slow giant fools with immense strength, but according to Waylowin's description, it seemed not to be the case. He didn't know Knight Hamza, but he was aware of Hamilton's strength. If a knight like Hamza, whose strength was comparable to Hamilton's, couldn't withstand the ogre, Rain also had the awareness that even if he activated his blacksmith strength LV3, he would not be a match for the ogre. I've been feeling that something's been off this last year. There's been too much happening in the Meister County. Waylowin seemed to recall and sighed at this moment. After we get back, we must report this matter to Lord Hamilton immediately. If Rain felt somewhat complacent after his mass killing at the Merfolk camp, then after understanding the formidable strength of the ogre, that trace of complacency in his heart disappeared without a trace. The revolution is not yet successful. Comrades still need to work hard. A famous saying from his past life naturally came to Rain's mind. Flashgold Town, in the afternoon. A middle-aged man clad in a black waistcoat, of exceedingly ordinary appearance, stepped into the noisy tavern belonging to the family with thick eyebrows. At this time, the tavern was gradually filling with people, many mercenaries, artisans of various trades, idlers, and even off-duty law enforcement officers would come for a drink to relax after a day's hard work. The man in black quietly ordered the most common rye beer and began sipping it in small mouthfuls. What went unnoticed was that his ears twitched slightly, as if he was carefully discerning whether there was any information he needed in the patron's boasts and conversations. He was known as Poison Blade, an assassin nurtured by the Brotherhood of the Wilderness, tasked mainly with dealing with people and matters that couldn't withstand the light.
I'm so short.
This time, he had received orders from above. Apparently, a big shot had commanded him to kill a young man and suggested that it would be best if the death looked accidental. Upon receiving the mission, Poison Blade immediately conducted a detailed analysis of the target based on the information given. Rain, aged between 14 and 16, the son of a farmer from Flashgold Town, currently undergoing servant training at the Habsburg Manor, combat strength rating, militia plus dot. When Poison Blade first saw the information before him, he didn't show any signs of surprise, because the whims of important figures are always a bit peculiar. In the past, he had done dirtier jobs involving even stranger targets such as a viscount's personal maid, a baroness's accompanying guard, and even a newborn baby from a noble family. Soon, Poison Blade, who was all ears, picked up the information he needed amidst the clamor of the tavern. What a tragedy! The only son of the Iwan family died during servant training at the Habsburg Manor, eaten alive by a knoll, said a man with a horse-like face dressed as a mercenary. Really? I thought the Habsburg Manor always had guards. If even that place isn't safe, doesn't that make Flashgold Town even less so? The burly man across from him looked skeptical as he drank. Ah, don't be so quick to doubt. The son of the owner of this very Oak Tavern, where we are now, was training with the Iwan boy. When that kid came back yesterday, he was scared out of his wits. However, I've heard he was the first one to cry for help at that time. Look, That's the young man sitting over there. The horse-faced mercenary lifted his head, gesturing. The burly man immediately looked over and nodded, no longer doubting. The young man sitting there was indeed the son of the owner of the Oak Tavern, apparently named Richard, whom he had met a few times. So it looks like the story must be true. So is the servant training suspended now? Of course, the training's been put on hold ever since the incident. The horse-faced mercenary gulped down half a glass of rye beer and belched contentedly. Poison Blade quickly learned that the servant training the target was attending had been suspended. In that case, there's no need to carry out my original plan of sneaking into the Habsburg Manor. The most difficult part of the mission was unexpectedly avoided.
愚か者が。
completely forgot I haven't even touched the daily quest yet. Let's go do that. Warm. I gotta go help out in the backyard to get my fuel. I'll probably wait for the sun to go down a bit. Whew. Okay, let's finish up this daily, and I'm gonna head out for a little bit. Dang it.
PSE first. Eliminated. Good work. Success.
I can't even hear the music anymore.
PSE climax.
That's fine, okay. What are you doing here? What? Okay, I'm gonna hop off for a bit. I'll be back on later. I'll see you guys